Have you ever noticed when people feel in sync, not studied, they open up? This is what the mirror technique taps into. It starts small, a shared pace, similar posture, picking up on the rhythm of how they speak. When someone leans in, you follow just slightly. When they pause, you don't rush in, you let that silence breathe. When you reply, you reflect their own words back. It's not about imitation, it's about resonance. And in that moment, the conversation stops feeling like a negotiation and starts feeling like a connection. Picture a hallway conversation. A team member is clearly holding back. Instead of interrogating, you simply match their calm tone, mirror their stance, and give them room. They say more. You stay with them. And slowly, what was guarded becomes open. Mirroring works because it bypasses resistance. It signals, I'm not here to fix you or judge you. I'm just here with you. You'll see it in counseling sessions, in high-stakes sales calls, in tough parenting moments where logic fails but empathy gets through. People soften when they feel like you're on the same wavelength, even if the topic is hard. When you match someone's emotional tempo, they don't feel cornered. They feel safe. And safety leads to honesty. The mirror technique doesn't demand cleverness, just attention. It's one of the quietest ways to build trust, and one of the fastest. The yes ladder. Agreement doesn't always begin with the big question. It often starts smaller. One quiet yes at a time. In a shared office kitchen, a team lead approaches a new hire. It's their first week, and they've been quiet during meetings. Instead of diving into feedback, the lead starts simple. Hey, did you find the printer okay yesterday? They nod. Yeah. A smile. And the onboarding videos, those didn't freeze up on you? Another nod. Nope, all smooth. One more. Mind if we catch up for 5 minutes later this afternoon? Another soft yes. Easier this time. And when they sit down later to talk about workflow and expectations, there's no defensiveness, just a shared rhythm. The yes ladder works by building momentum through agreement. Small, non-threatening questions first. Things the other person can say yes to without effort or hesitation. Each yes relaxes the body a little more. It sets a pattern. By the time you ask for something bigger, it doesn't feel like a request. It feels like the next step in the same direction. It's something you'll see in old friendships when reconnecting after time apart, or in community organizing where you build trust not with speeches, but with simple, mutual understanding, even in casual relationships, where agreement builds comfort before it builds influence. You're not pushing, you're aligning. You're easing the other person into the experience with their own momentum. Because the hardest part of saying yes isn't the word, it's the fear of being pulled too fast. But when you're already halfway up the ladder, taking one more step feels natural. Not because someone talked you into it, but because you walked there, one yes at a time. Say because for instant obedience, not because the explanation is always good, but because there is one. We're wired to connect requests with reasons. Without a because, a question feels like a demand. Add it, and it becomes a conversation, even if the reason is barely more than air. You'll see it in everyday moments. Could I take this seat because my foot's cramping? Mind if I go ahead because my coffee's already paid for? Even, can I borrow your charger because mine's in the other room? The actual logic doesn't have to be airtight. The word alone acts like a key. It signals structure, intention, a path. And people follow paths more easily than gaps. This also shows up in smaller social dynamics. Not manipulation, just friction reduction. Because gives the other person a reason to say yes without overthinking it. So next time you're asking something, even something small, don't just ask. Anchor it, because once you give the mind a reason, it stops holding the brakes. Bring something in your hands. First impressions are built faster than we think, often before a word is even spoken. In the corner of a co-working space, a young man walks into a small group already mid-conversation. He's new, unfamiliar to most of them. As he approaches, he's holding 2 mugs, one for himself, the other for whoever's nearby. "I wasn't sure if anyone wanted tea," he says, offering it without ceremony. One of the group members chuckles, accepts it, and the circle subtly opens to make space. The man sits, quiet at first, but welcomed. No need for credentials or name-dropping. He walked in with something in his hands, something simple, something shared. Carrying something, whether it's coffee, a notepad, a printout, or even a snack, does more than occupy your hands. It gives you presence without pressure. It softens your entry into a space by showing intention and usefulness. You're not just arriving, you're arriving with something. In parenting, giving a child something to carry can shift their energy in new settings. In therapy, holding a tactile object can ground anxious clients. In networking, offering gum or passing a pen is sometimes the most natural way to break the ice. In leadership, entering a meeting with materials in hand subtly signals preparedness without saying a word. What you carry doesn't have to be important. It just has to say, "I'm here for a reason." Even small items can quiet social friction. They give your hands something to do and others something to engage with. And sometimes that's all it takes to turn an entrance into a welcome. The confidence loop. Sometimes people don't need encouragement. They just need a mirror that reflects what they wish they already believed. Outside a crowded cafe, someone hesitates before stepping through the door for an open mic night. They signed up weeks ago but nearly walked past the building. A stranger holding the door smiles and says, "Looks like you're right on time. I always like hearing the early performers." There's no pressure, just a small assumption of confidence. And by the time they reach the stage, that borrowed belief feels like their own. The confidence loop begins not with self-belief, but with how someone is seen. When you treat someone like they're already capable, they begin to act that way. And when others respond positively to that behavior, it reinforces the belief. The loop tightens, the posture shifts, and confidence begins to look like it was always there. You'll notice this among performers backstage, where nerves dissolve the moment someone says, "You've got the perfect energy for this crowd." Or in collaborative projects, where one quiet voice speaks up after someone else simply listens like it matters. Even with younger siblings or close friends, a little recognition often does more than advice. It's not about false praise. It's about lending belief, just enough for them to feel it themselves. Because most people don't need to be reminded of their limits. They already know those too well. What they need is someone to look at them like they've already made it to the other side. The power of pause. In a hallway after a community meeting, someone asks a pointed question. Everyone expects a quick answer. But the person it's directed at stays quiet. They look up, think, then say, slowly, "That's a good question. Let me think out loud for a second." The room shifts. People lean in, not because of what's said, but because of what wasn't. The silence made space for something real. The pause isn't hesitation. It's composure. That extra beat, just a little longer than expected, can carry more weight than anything spoken. A well-placed pause interrupts noise. It softens urgency. In close conversations, it adds weight. In tense moments, it signals calm. Even during everyday exchanges, that bit of quiet can make a reply feel considered instead of automatic. You'll see it between two people repairing a strained friendship, where silence doesn't rush to fill the discomfort, or when someone's asked about a memory they haven't shared in a while, and they stop, not because they're unsure, but because they want to get it right. It works because silence is never truly blank. We fill it with expectation, hope, worry, meaning. And a pause, used with care, holds that space long enough to be felt. The pause isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of thought. And when you let it land fully, people don't just hear what comes next, they're ready for it. Use their name, rewire the brain. At a neighborhood cafe, someone places their order, half distracted. The barista repeats it back. Got it, Jess. I'll have that out in a second. It's simple, no big moment. But Jess looks up, just slightly surprised. The sound of their name, spoken without prompting, lands quietly. Names have weight. Even when softly used, they cut through background noise. They tell us, this moment is meant for you. You don't need to overuse it. In fact, when you drop someone's name into a natural pause, once, maybe twice, it can shift the entire tone. It's a signal of presence, a small cue that says, I'm not talking to anyone, I'm talking to you. This works especially well in new friendships, when people are still figuring out if they're being fully seen, or in familiar but distant connections, like a neighbor you only half know, where using their name bridges that space. It also softens tension. When conversations get complicated or emotions spike, a name quietly recenters the moment. It reminds both sides there's a person beneath the words. You'll even notice it in written form. A message that ends with your name feels more anchored, more direct, more human. Like it wasn't copied and pasted. It was meant for you. That's the effect. A name, when used sincerely, doesn't just personalize. It grounds. It restores focus. And sometimes it reminds someone of who they are, right when they need it most. Dress one level higher. At a weekend gathering, there's one person who walks in just a little more polished than everyone else. Not flashy, just clean lines, well-fitted clothes, quiet confidence. No one says anything, but glances linger a bit longer. Conversations shift toward them just slightly faster. That's the trick. Dress one level higher than the room, not to outdo, but to signal care. It's not about brands. It's not about trends. It's about intention. When you show up just a bit more pulled together, people assume the rest of you might be too. This shows up at art openings, where the person in pressed denim and a crisp collar draws curiosity. Or during casual dates, where effort lands far louder than charm. Even at community events, someone with clean shoes and a tucked-in shirt tends to be asked, "Hey, are you helping run this?" We subconsciously assign competence and warmth to those who look like they tried, but didn't try too hard. It's the sweet spot between blending in and standing out. The visual signal is processed in seconds. Before you speak, people decide whether to lean in, whether to listen longer, whether to remember you. And once that impression lands, your words ride its momentum. You don't need a new wardrobe. You just need one step up from the expected. Because dressing well doesn't say, "Look at me." It says, "This mattered enough for me to prepare." And people tend to remember the ones who made things feel just a little more intentional. The 5-to-1 ratio rule. 2 friends are cleaning up after a trip. One's folding clothes, the other's wiping down counters. The air is light, but earlier there was a small argument, forgotten plans, raised voices. Now one of them tosses over a bottle of water and says, "You know, you're actually the best at organizing chaos." No apology, Just an intentional, honest moment of goodwill. This is the 5-to-1 rule in motion. For every difficult moment, it takes several small positives to steady the ground again. Not grand gestures, just quiet reinforcements, appreciation, respect, warmth, care, humor. Strong relationships, of any kind, aren't built on avoiding conflict. They're built on having enough good to hold steady when tension shows up. Think of it like balance. If someone interrupts you once, but makes you laugh 5 times, you don't call them rude, you call them fun. If someone forgot your birthday, but checked in every time you were sick, the scales often still tip toward trust. This shows up naturally in long friendships, where jokes, memories, and small kindnesses buffer against occasional friction, or during late-night conversations, where a compliment can quietly undo something left unsaid earlier. It's not about tracking points. It's about remembering that the emotional tone of a relationship is cumulative. The heavier moments don't weigh as much when they're surrounded by care. So when things feel off, don't always rush to fix. Just start adding small truths that make someone feel seen again. 90-minute sleep cycle unlock. That one shift, thinking in sleep cycles, not hours, can change how rested you feel. Sleep runs in roughly 90-minute rhythms: light sleep, deep sleep, dream state, reset. If you wake up mid-cycle, even after 9 hours, you feel groggy. But if you wake up right after a cycle ends, even with less total sleep, you often feel alert. It's like sneaking out of a movie just after the credits roll instead of in the middle of a scene. This trick becomes second nature for people who have inconsistent schedules, like creatives who work late and still want functional mornings, or travelers who crash at odd hours and just want to wake up clear-headed. Even during unexpected naps, 90 minutes can feel like a full reboot when timed right. You can try it tonight. Just take the current time, add 15 minutes to fall asleep, then count forward in 90-minute blocks. Set your alarm for the end of a full cycle, not the middle of one. It's not about sleeping longer. It's about waking smarter. And when you sync with your body's rhythm, mornings stop feeling like interruptions and start feeling like arrivals. The first word wins. At a small get-together, someone walks in with a plate of snacks and says, "Okay, you've got to hear this story before I lose my nerve." Everyone around the table stops what they're doing, not because of the story's content, but because of its timing. It came first. It came with energy. It framed what followed. That's the primacy effect. The first thing said isn't just remembered more. It shapes how everything else is heard. When you start a conversation, the first sentence does more than introduce. It directs attention. It sets the temperature. It says, "This is the tone we're going with." You'll see this when someone breaks the ice with a strange fact or a disarming question. Suddenly, the entire group shifts. What felt formal becomes playful. Or, when meeting someone new, the first thing they say about a mutual friend sticks, even if 10 other things follow. It's not about control. It's about influence. The brain is wired to hold on to the first frame it's given. Everything after that gets compared to it. That's why people who begin with warmth are rarely thought of as cold, even if they speak bluntly later. Or why a first compliment can anchor a connection, even if the rest of the conversation stumbles a bit. If you want to shape the mood, shape the beginning. Start with something honest, intentional, or curious. Because once the frame is set, people tend to see the picture the way you painted it, no matter what's added after. The last word lingers. After dinner, the conversation winds down. Dishes are cleared, chairs scrape, someone stands to leave. Just before walking out, they turn back and say, "You know, I always feel better after these nights." No response needed, no follow-up. But that line stays with everyone longer than anything said before it. That's the power of the last word. Not just the final thing spoken, but the one that carries out the emotional tone. It doesn't have to be clever, just intentional. The human mind gives extra weight to what it hears last. It's a simple cognitive tilt. Endings stick. Whether it's the final moment of a movie or the last message before sleep, we remember how things leave us more than how they meet us. You'll see this when someone signs off a call with a quiet thank you instead of small talk. Or when a late-night text ends, not with a question, but with reassurance. Those final notes shape how we hold the whole interaction. It doesn't have to be deep. Drive safe. I'll think about what you said. This was good. Any of these, if said with care, anchor the memory. It works because endings feel like conclusions, even if nothing was resolved. And when the last word carries warmth, sincerity, or perspective, it reframes what came before. You don't need to control the conversation, you just need to land it gently. Because long after the talk is over, people often carry the exit more than the entry. Smile first, feel later. Walking through a familiar park, someone passes a neighbor they haven't seen in a while. Without thinking, they smile. A quick lift of the face, almost automatic. The neighbor smiles back, just as reflexively. A few steps later, the person realizes they actually feel lighter, happier, like something shifted. They didn't smile because they felt good. They felt good because they smiled. The body can shape the mind. It's subtle but powerful. When you smile, especially in tense or uncertain moments, you don't just express emotion, you create it. The muscles send signals upward. The brain, without overthinking, adjusts. You'll notice it during chance reunions, where someone's smile starts awkward and ends real, or at crosswalks, where two strangers lock eyes for a second and exchange that small human acknowledgement, or even when you catch your own reflection and half smile back, just to see what happens. It works because the brain listens to the body. Change the pattern and emotion follows. Not every time, not completely, but enough to tilt the moment forward. It doesn't mean faking your feelings, it means inviting them, gently, leading with the body and letting the heart catch up if it wants to. So next time things feel flat or disconnected, start with the smallest shift, a soft smile, even just to yourself. You don't have to mean it yet, but sometimes the meaning comes after. Lower your voice, raise their respect. At a local event, a disagreement starts over something small. Who was supposed to bring what? Voices rise slightly, energy shifts. Then one person speaks, not loudly, not with force, but lower, slower, calm. Suddenly the room recalibrates. Not because of what they said, but because of how they said it. Volume doesn't equal authority. Presence does. And lowering your voice in moments of tension signals something stronger than dominance. It signals control. It's not about whispering. It's about resisting the pull to match the noise around you. When you drop your tone, others lean in. When you slow down, others follow suit. And in that shift, attention becomes focus. You'll notice this in small group conversations, when someone changes the energy not by taking the spotlight, but by softening their delivery. Or during emotionally charged talks between close friends, when one person stops pushing and starts anchoring. It works because we're wired to notice contrast. A calm voice in a loud space doesn't fade, it cuts through. Not with aggression, but with gravity. And it often surprises people, because we're used to thinking that louder wins. But in many moments, it's the voice that drops, not the one that rises, that holds the room. So next time you feel the urge to raise your voice, try lowering it instead. The difference won't be in the decibels. It'll be in how people respond when they realize they don't have to fight to hear you. Nod while asking equals yes bias. Two friends are standing in front of a food truck, both indecisive. One turns to the other and says, "You want to split the sweet potato fries?" and nods as they ask. Without even thinking, the other one nods too. Yeah, sure. It's not pressure, it's rhythm. When you nod while asking a question, it plants a subtle bias toward agreement. The body says yes, and the brain often follows. It's called the yes bias, and it shows up in the tiniest places. When someone gestures agreement, we unconsciously mirror it. When a head tilts forward with curiosity, we tilt with it. The body speaks first, and the response comes after. You'll notice it in casual decisions, choosing a movie, picking a route, planning a hangout. One person suggests, nods slightly, and the other person finds themselves saying okay before weighing the alternatives. It's not mind control, it's alignment. A small cue that says, this is probably safe, probably reasonable, probably fine, and most of the time, it is. The effect works best when the question is already leaning toward yes. You're not convincing, you're clearing friction. It also works when helping someone through hesitation, like offering encouragement gently. Want to give it a try? Nod, and suddenly the answer feels less risky. So next time you ask something simple, let your body say it first. A soft nod, a calm presence, just enough to tip the answer toward yes, without needing to push it there. Ask for advice, gain influence. Two classmates are chatting after a group project. One turns to the other and says, "Hey, quick thing, how would you have handled the part where the plan almost fell apart?" No ego, no setup, just a sincere ask. And just like that, the dynamic shifts. Asking for advice doesn't make you look uncertain. It makes people feel valued. It invites trust. And surprisingly, it often leads to greater influence, not less. That's because when someone gives advice, they unconsciously commit to your success. They start rooting for the outcome they helped shape. It's no longer your effort alone, it's partly theirs. You'll see this between neighbors trying to fix something simple, like a leaky tap, or during new friendships where one person asks the other, "How do you usually handle stuff like this?" The act of asking says, "I trust your judgment," and that's rarely ignored. It's not flattery, it's connection. And it flips the script, because most people expect influence to come from confidence, but influence often grows from humility. And the beautiful part, you don't even have to take the advice. Just asking invites someone into your thought process. And that's where alignment starts. So if you want to open someone up, skip the pitch. Ask them what they do. The answer might be helpful, but the moment of being asked, that's what truly lands. Echo their words, earn their trust. At a crowded outdoor market, someone is explaining where they got the handmade scarf they're wearing. The other person, half listening at first, suddenly tunes in when they hear, "I guess I'm drawn to things that feel like they've been through something." The listener repeats it back, not dramatically, just things that feel like they've been through something. The speaker pauses, nods, and keeps going, now more open. It doesn't take deep insight to make someone feel understood. Sometimes, all it takes is using their own words, gently mirrored back. This is the power of low-key reflection, not imitation, not interruption, just echoing a key phrase in someone's sentence. A subtle signal that you caught what mattered most. You'll notice this during long walks, where someone opens up gradually and you simply follow their language. Or during casual catch-ups, where someone says, "It's been a weird month," and you reply, "Weird how?" repeating their word instead of replacing it. It's disarming because it's easy. No correction, no redirection, just space to expand. And it works even when things are tense. If someone says, "I just felt dismissed," and you respond with, "Dismissed?" Not skeptically, just sincerely, they're more likely to explain than defend. The brain relaxes when it hears its own words reflected. It feels less alone. So next time someone shares something real, let your response come from what they already gave you. A word, a phrase, echoed with care. That's often what trust sounds like, familiar, but coming from someone else. Let them talk first, then you win. There it is. The real beginning of the conversation. When you let someone speak first, they show you where they are. What they say gives you the map. And once you have the map, it's easier to meet them, without guessing. Most people rush to talk first, thinking it gives them control. But the opposite is often true. When you speak second, you get to shape your response with precision, not projection. You'll notice this in slow-moving conversations with people you've just met, or in small reunions where someone needs a minute before opening up. Even in casual decision-making, like choosing where to eat, whoever speaks second often steers the direction, because they're responding instead of reaching. It works because people reveal more than they think when they go first. You catch their tone, their pace, what matters to them. And when your reply is shaped by what they offered, not what you assumed, it lands softer and sticks longer. Letting them go first isn't passive. It's strategic stillness, a way of learning before speaking. And the quiet before you talk, that's where the real leverage lives. Speak slower to sound smarter. At a weekend hangout, everyone's chatting over snacks. Stories overlap, voices bounce, and then someone jumps in. Not loudly, not forcefully, but slower than the rest. So this might sound random, but has anyone ever actually read the instructions on microwave popcorn? The room stops just enough to listen, not because the topic is profound, but because of the way it was delivered. When you speak a little slower than expected, people don't hear it as hesitation, they hear it as thoughtfulness. The human brain is wired to associate pacing with certainty, not speed, not volume, but rhythm. A slightly slower pace says, "I'm not rushing this. I've already considered it." You'll see this in conversations with someone who doesn't interrupt, who waits a beat before replying, whose sentences don't tumble over each other. They're not always the loudest voice, but often they're the one people remember. It shows up in quiet one-on-one talks too, like on a porch late at night, when someone takes their time explaining how they really feel. Or during unexpected encounters, when someone answers a simple question like, "It actually deserves a real answer." It works because our attention follows what feels deliberate. When you slow down, your words stand out. The silence between them earns weight. You don't need to drag it out. Just resist the urge to rush. A few extra seconds can make even simple thoughts feel grounded, clear, and worth hearing. Because in most conversations, the smartest voice isn't the one that fills the space. It's the one that knows how to shape it. Frame it as a choice. No one likes being told what to do, even when it's reasonable, even when it's helpful. But offer the same request as a choice, and suddenly it feels easier to agree. That's because the brain doesn't just care about the message, it cares about control. When you give someone an option, you protect their autonomy, and that quiet reassurance often gets you what you were asking for anyway. Instead of "let's leave now," try "you want to head out now or stay a few more minutes." Not "you need to calm down," but "do you want to take a breath or talk through it?" In both cases, nothing changed except the feeling of ownership. You'll notice this among close friends during travel plans, where the more flexible phrasing often wins out, or during shared projects, where phrasing something as, "Do you want to?" makes collaboration smoother. It even works in text. Totally fine either way, but would you rather do this today or tomorrow? It's not reverse psychology, it's removing resistance before it shows up. People don't push back because of what you're saying. They push back because it wasn't their decision. So if you want less friction, don't push at all. Let them steer. Because once it feels like their choice, the outcome doesn't need to be forced. It just happens. Point your feet, reveal intent. It's easy to fake eye contact, easy to smile politely, but your feet rarely lie. They're often the first part of you to betray what you really want, whether it's to stay, leave, connect, or pull away. Watch any conversation from a distance. You'll see it before you hear it. If two people are engaged, their feet point toward each other, not just their heads. If someone's itching to go, their words might stay, but their feet are already angled toward the door. This is low-level body language, not the kind you rehearse, but the kind you default to. And once you notice it, it becomes impossible to unsee. It shows up at bus stops, during small talk that overstays its welcome. At parties, when someone's talking to a group but clearly locked in on just one person. Even during casual hangouts, where two people sitting cross-legged toward each other usually forget they're in a crowd. Your feet anchor your real attention. They point where your energy is going, even if you haven't said it yet. It also works in reverse. If you want someone to feel included, shift your stance. Point toward them. You don't have to speak louder or gesture more. The feet do half the inviting for you. Because underneath every conversation, there's a second one happening quietly. And more often than not, your shoes are the ones talking first. Look at their shoes, read their personality. You don't have to judge, just notice. Scuffed toes, laces double knotted, clean but well worn, loud colours, silent soles. People don't always choose their shoes carefully, but they live in them. And over time, the way someone treats their shoes says more than they think. Not about fashion, about rhythm, about how they move through the world. Some pairs are pristine, cleaned, protected, placed neatly by the door. Others are practical, beaten up from errands and early mornings. Some don't match the rest of the outfit, but were clearly the most comfortable option. All of its data, offered, not announced. You don't need to draw conclusions, just track patterns. You'll notice it when someone's wearing rain boots on a dry day, not because they forgot, but because they plan ahead. Or when someone's sneakers are bright, but their posture is quiet. There's a contrast worth understanding. Even worn-out soles on expensive shoes tell you something. How they spend may not reflect how they maintain. And when someone shows up in shoes that clearly weren't chosen for the setting, a wedding, a hike, a night out, it's rarely random. It's either a message or a comfort boundary that overrides the message. The feet don't lie, and the shoes they wear carry silent backstories. So if you want to read someone, don't just listen to what they say. Look down, briefly, not to judge, but to understand the ground they've already covered. Ask for a small favor to build bond, borrowing a phone charger, asking someone to hold your spot in line, requesting help moving a chair. These aren't acts of desperation, they're tiny trust exercises. When you ask for a small favor, you're not inconveniencing someone. You're giving them a subtle invitation to invest. And once they do, even just a little, their brain starts to justify it. I must like this person. Otherwise, why would I have helped? That's how closeness begins, not through big moments, but through small asks that imply, quietly, I trust you. It's called the Ben Franklin effect. but you don't need to know the name to feel the effect. You'll see it when new neighbors settle in and ask where the recycling goes. Or when two people who barely know each other walk into a crowded room and one whispers, "Can you save me a seat?" It works because effort reshapes perception. We're wired to assume our actions mean something, so doing a small kindness rewires how we feel about the person we did it for. The trick isn't manipulation, it's vulnerability. You're not proving you're useful, you're proving you're willing to ask. And that's often what turns politeness into connection. So next time you want to build rapport, don't offer help. Ask for it. Just a little. Because people bond faster when they feel needed, not just admired. Use silence to own space. A story's just ended. People are waiting for a reaction. The speaker stays quiet. Not awkwardly, just long enough that the room settles around them. No apology, no rush, just space. And in that space, something shifts. People adjust. The quiet isn't tension, it's presence. Silence, when held with intention, isn't empty, it's structure. And those who can sit with it, especially when everyone else is trying to fill it, often end up owning the room without ever raising their voice. This shows up in slow conversations, where someone replies after a beat instead of instantly, or during group moments, where a pause before speaking makes the words feel more deliberate. It's not about power, it's about rhythm. You don't have to fight for airtime if you show you're not in a hurry to fill it. You'll notice it most in social situations where the pace is frantic, where the first person who doesn't rush is the one everyone starts watching. Not because they demand it, but because silence draws attention more than noise ever could. We assume people who leave space aren't stalling, they're thinking. And when the words arrive, they land differently. So next time you're tempted to fill the gap, wait, let the moment breathe. Let others come to you. Because silence isn't the absence of speech. It's a signal that something real is about to be said. Show palm, gain trust. Mid-conversation, someone gestures with an open hand, not dramatic, not performative, just a casual move, palm up as they speak. The other person doesn't flinch or pull back. In fact, they lean in slightly. Open palms signal something we rarely name out loud: safety. Long before words evolved, the human body learned to detect threat or openness in posture. Palms hidden meant concealment. Palms visible, no weapon, no tension, just presence. Even today, that instinct sticks. You'll notice it when someone's trying to diffuse tension, not by talking softer, but by keeping their hands visible and relaxed. Or when a friend shrugs with both hands out saying, "I didn't mean it that way." The message lands because the body says it first. It's also why certain conversations feel easier when you're sitting side by side, hands resting on the table. Not crossed, not hidden. The body makes the promise before the words do. This isn't about performance, it's about alignment. When what you say and how you physically show up match, people believe you without needing to be convinced. So if you want to build trust, quickly, quietly, don't just say the right thing. Let your hands stay where they can be seen. Not in surrender, but in sincerity. Because when the body speaks truth first, the mind tends to follow. Compliment behind their back. You mention offhand that someone handled a weird situation with surprising calm, not to them, but to someone else. And you don't make a show of it. You just say it and move on. A day later, they're warmer with you, a little more open. Maybe they don't even know why. Because compliments, when given quietly and indirectly, don't lose their power. They multiply it. When you say something kind behind someone's back, it often finds its way back to them. Not always in full, not always immediately, but people talk. And when they discover you spoke well of them without needing credit, it lands harder. That's because the absence of performance makes the compliment feel real. You'll see this in friend groups where someone casually says, "They're always solid in a crisis," and it circles back like a delayed note. Or between neighbours when one says to another, "She's the kind of person who'll check on you when no one else does." The impact isn't just what's heard, it's what's inferred. If you spoke kindly when they weren't around, you probably see them with generosity when they are. This isn't manipulation, it's quiet affirmation. A way of letting someone know they matter, without the awkwardness of telling them to their face. So next time you notice something good in someone, consider not saying it to them. Say it nearby. Say it sincerely. Say it when there's nothing in it for you, and trust that it'll echo exactly where it needs to. Use we instead of you. "You forgot to lock the door," versus "Looks like we forgot to lock the door." Same facts, different feeling, one point. The other joins. When you say we instead of you, you're not changing what happened, you're changing how it lands. The shift is subtle, but the emotional impact is immediate. Suddenly, you're not blaming, you're partnering. This isn't about avoiding responsibility, it's about preserving connection. Because even small phrases can make someone feel either isolated or included. And we is one of the quickest ways to move toward inclusion. You'll hear it between friends trying to sort out a miscommunication. "We must have crossed wires" feels lighter than "you didn't say that." Or when making group decisions, "Should we head out?" carries more warmth than "Are you ready to go?" It also shows up in apologies. "We didn't handle that right," softens the ground. Even if one person played a bigger role, the shared framing builds trust. We language signals unity, especially in moments that could become tense. And when people feel like you're on their side, they stop defending and start listening. So the next time something small goes sideways, don't assign the spotlight. Share it. Use we not to blur the truth, but to hold it gently. Because the goal isn't to be right, it's to stay close. Break the script, control the moment. "Hi, how are you?" "Good, you?" "Good." That's the default, a loop. Nobody's thinking, everyone's just responding, until someone breaks it. "Hi, how are you?" I once saw someone rescue a duck from a fountain with a traffic cone. Now the moment is real. Breaking the script means stepping out of the expected rhythm, not to confuse, to wake things up. Most conversations run on autopilot, safe, familiar, forgettable. But when you interrupt that rhythm gently and playfully, you take control of attention, not by force, but by contrast. It could be a surprising compliment instead of a hello, a story instead of a status update, even a quiet pause where people expected quick words. You'll see it when someone answers, "How's it going?" with, "Better now that you're here," and somehow it lands. Or when a guest at a gathering offers to help wash dishes instead of waiting to be entertained. People notice because the rhythm changed. It works because the brain is wired to notice the unexpected. Patterns make us tune out. Surprises make us present. This doesn't mean being random. It means being awake, choosing to play instead of perform, redirecting the moment, not with volume, but with novelty. So next time you feel a moment slipping into default, change one line. Tilt the rhythm. Be just unexpected enough to make someone remember it happened, because whoever breaks the script writes the next line. Mirror their breathing to calm them. Sometimes words aren't the thing that helps. Someone's anxious, agitated, or just on the edge, and advice won't land. But your presence might. Not by saying the right thing, but by breathing the right way. When you quietly match someone's breathing, your body says, "I'm here, I'm with you." And once you sync, you can slowly slow your own breath, guiding theirs without needing to speak. You don't announce it. You don't force it. You just breathe, steady, quiet, grounded. And something in them often softens to meet you. You'll notice this in shared silences. Sitting together on a park bench after bad news, standing side by side in a kitchen after an argument, or waiting out a moment that doesn't need fixing, just holding. It works because the nervous system is social. We mirror without realizing it. So when you give someone a slower rhythm to match, their body often follows without trying. This isn't about control, it's about connection. Matching breath isn't a tactic, it's a gesture, a way of saying, you're not alone in this moment. So next time someone seems overwhelmed, don't rush to comfort them with words. Just pause, sit near, match their breath, let yours settle, and trust that sometimes calm is something you pass to another person, not by explaining it, but by living it beside them. Give the gift first. You show up with their favorite drink, nothing big, nothing flashy, just a small thing they didn't ask for. They say, you didn't have to. You say, I know. But something shifts. Giving first changes the entire tone of a relationship. It rewrites the atmosphere before any words are exchanged. We're used to transactions, scorekeeping. Even when we don't mean to, part of us tallies effort. But when someone gives without asking for anything in return, it scrambles that system in the best way. It doesn't have to be a gift. It can be a favor, a seat, a saved slice of dessert, a message sent just to say, hey, this made me think of you. You'll notice how differently people respond when you show up having already done something kind. The walls come down. Conversations feel easier. People become more open because they've already been met with care. It works because generosity, especially when it's not explained, tells people they matter. Not as a reward, not as a response, but as a choice. This doesn't mean overextending. It means leading with warmth, giving a moment of kindness without waiting to see if it'll be returned. Because once someone feels gifted, not obligated, they start to see the space between you as safe. And from there, the rest gets easier. Use the spotlight effect to own a room. In most rooms, everyone thinks they're being watched. Not because they are, but because the brain quietly insists on it. This is the spotlight effect, the tendency to overestimate how much others notice our actions, appearance, or mistakes. That stain you keep adjusting your sleeve to cover, the stumble you made while walking in. You might obsess over it for hours, but chances are no one else even registered it. And that's the trick. While you feel like the center of attention, so does everyone else. Most people are so consumed with their own self-awareness, they barely have time to fully focus on yours. But here's where it flips. If your brain already believes you're being seen, you can use that illusion as leverage. Not by trying to be perfect, but by showing ease in the moment. The people who seem most confident often aren't the most polished or practiced. They're just the ones who aren't scrambling to hide. They accept the light that's already there and stand in it without apology. That quiet self-permission, shoulders relaxed, expression unforced, creates presence. People notice not because you demanded attention, but because you didn't tense up under it. Owning a room doesn't mean taking it over. It means understanding that nobody's watching as closely as you think. And if they are, you get to decide what they see. Not someone shrinking under imagined judgment, but someone still, someone grounded. So the next time that invisible spotlight turns toward you, don't rush to move out of it. Stay exactly where you are. Let the moment settle. And realize being seen isn't the threat, it's the opportunity. Let them finish the sentence. There's a kind of interruption that doesn't feel loud. It happens when someone thinks they know where you're going and jumps in to finish your thought. They might get it right. They might be trying to help, but it still takes something away. It's not the words, it's the space. The small space you needed to arrive at, the idea yourself. Letting someone finish their sentence isn't about being polite. It's about giving them room to fully land. There's trust in the pause. It shows you're not rushing to respond or prove you understand. You're letting them shape the moment before you add anything to it. You'll notice it most in slow conversations, the ones where someone is trying to explain something they've never quite said out loud before. Maybe they're circling around a feeling, or trying to get the story straight in their own head. And when they get interrupted, even with good intentions, you can see it happen. A small hesitation. A sentence that never fully returns. Letting them finish doesn't just make them feel heard. It helps them hear themselves. Because often, we don't know what we really think until we've said it all the way through. And being allowed to do that, without being steered or completed, is a quiet kind of gift. So the next time you're in a conversation and you think you know what someone's about to say, don't say it for them. Let the silence stretch if it needs to. Give them the floor until they choose to step off it. You might be surprised by how much more honest things sound when they're allowed to arrive fully formed. You seem like instant rapport. There's a strange kind of connection that forms when someone says, "You seem like the kind of person who..." It's not always accurate. Sometimes it's a little off, but it almost always lands. Not because it's perfectly insightful, but because it shows they're paying attention, they're noticing something, and they're trying to name it, even gently. This simple phrase creates an opening. It's not a compliment, not a guess, it's a reflection. A soft way of saying, "Here's how you come across to me." And most people lean into that moment because we rarely get to see ourselves through someone else's lens unless we ask. You seem like the kind of person who keeps snacks in their bag just in case. You seem like you notice when people feel left out. You seem like someone who reads more than they let on. Even if it's a little wrong, it invites clarification. Not quite, but... And just like that, the conversation deepens. What was surface level becomes personal, without force. This works because it balances two human needs, being seen and being understood. When someone offers a perception of you, it gives you a chance to step into it or reshape it. Either way, it moves the exchange from small talk to something with texture. So next time you're trying to connect, don't ask people to define themselves. Offer a glimpse of how you see them and let them respond. A sentence that starts with, "You seem like," might be the beginning of one they actually want to finish. Pretend you're the host. There are moments when you walk into a room and feel like you're borrowing space. Conversations are already flowing, groups are already formed, and it's easy to shrink into the background, to wait for someone to invite you in. You're at a birthday party that isn't really your crowd. You were invited through a mutual friend who's now across the room in the middle of a story. You linger near the kitchen, pretending to scroll. Then, without overthinking it, you refill the chip bowl, straighten a stack of napkins. You ask the guy next to you, "Hey, have you tried the weird green dip yet?" He smiles. "Number, what's in it?" "No clue, but I've committed to it now. Want some?" It's small, but in that moment, you stopped being a guest. You acted like a host. When you act like the space is partly yours, when you take small responsibility for how others feel, you automatically gain quiet authority. People notice it, even if they don't register why. The human mind associates confidence with caretaking. Not loudness, not attention-seeking, just calm ownership of the environment. It's a trick often used by great teachers, smooth negotiators, and good managers. Not because they need control, but because people respond better when someone is subtly steering the room. It puts others at ease. You don't need to wait for permission to feel like you belong. You don't need a title or a role. Just start acting like the place could be slightly better because you're in it, and take one small step in that direction. That's usually all it takes for the rest of the room to unconsciously agree. You're not just there, you're part of it. Ask about childhood, instant connection. You're on a balcony at a friend's get-together. Someone you barely know joins you. Someone quiet, polite. After a few minutes of back and forth, you ask, "What were you like as a kid?" They pause. Not in a guarded way, but like they're sorting through old photos in their head. Then they smile. Honestly, kind of obsessed with trains. Suddenly, it's not small talk anymore. You're not just learning about them. You're meeting a version of them that shaped the rest. And the whole tone of the night changes. There's a reason questions about childhood work like this. The memories aren't just old. They're formative. They're often unfiltered, full of early joy, frustration, longing. When someone talks about their childhood, they're not just giving you information. They're handing you a blueprint for how they became who they are. And because it's personal, without being confrontational, defenses don't go up. It's soft entry. Therapists use it. Coaches use it. Good dates, good interviews, close friends, they all find their way there eventually. You can shortcut that timeline by just asking early, gently, without force. You're not mining for trauma or prying for secrets. You're opening a door to where people feel most themselves, even if they haven't visited in a while. The person in front of you has lived a life. If you want to understand them faster, start where the story began. Most people won't resist. They'll be relieved someone finally asked. Ask questions that make them reflect. Most conversations drift toward easy places. Shared opinions, casual complaints, daily updates. It keeps things moving, but nothing really sticks. And then, once in a while, someone asks something that makes you stop and actually think. You're in the back booth of a nearly empty cafe. It's late. You're talking with someone you've known for a while, but not deeply. Out of nowhere, they ask, "What do you think your younger self would be proud of in you today?" You laugh at first, caught off guard. Then you pause. Something about the question lingers. You sit with it. And when you answer, it's not automatic. It's something you've never said out loud before. That's the shift. From routine to reflection. And when a question does that, the dynamic between two people changes completely. The brain is wired to follow patterns. But when a question interrupts that, not to challenge, but to invite, the mind turns inward. It stops reaching for a prepared answer and starts forming a new one. That's where connection lives. You'll see this in coaching, in mentoring, in parenting moments that last. A question like, "What's something you've unlearned this year?" or "What are you afraid to want?" opens far more than small talk ever could. It shows care without pushing. The goal isn't to be clever. It's to ask in a way that makes the other person feel worth answering. Most people want to reflect. They just rarely get asked anything that gives them permission to. You don't need the perfect words. Just one honest question that makes someone go quiet for a second. Not because they're stuck, but because they're finally thinking about something that matters. That pause is the sound of trust being built. Self-deprecate, then take the stage. Confidence makes people listen. But too much of it too early makes people pull back, even if they don't show it. They nod, they smile, but something stays guarded. What lowers that guard, oddly enough, is a quick moment of humility. You're at a small team meeting, nothing major, weekly check-ins. It's your turn to present an idea. Before diving in, you say, "All right, I'm not exactly a design genius, so go easy on the mock-ups." Everyone chuckles. The room relaxes. You continue, and suddenly, everyone's actually paying attention. You didn't shrink yourself. You just made yourself easier to listen to. That's the shift. When you lightly poke fun at yourself first, the spotlight softens. You're not announcing dominance. You're inviting comfort. And once people are comfortable, they're far more open to whatever comes next. It works because self-deprecation disarms. It signals that you're self-aware, not overcompensating, not trying too hard. It also preempts judgment. By saying what people might be thinking, you take the power out of it. And then, when you do speak with confidence, it lands stronger. It feels earned, not forced. You'll hear it in stand-up comedy. You'll see it in TED Talks, in leadership retreats, even in classrooms. Not as an act, but as a pacing move. Start with warmth, then lead with clarity. The trick isn't to downplay what matters. It's to know when to soften the edge so people don't flinch before you speak. Say something real, slightly self-aware, maybe even a little clumsy. Then deliver what you came to say. In most rooms, you don't need to be the most polished. You just need to be someone people want to listen to. And a moment of honest humility is often the easiest way to get there. Sit diagonally, not head-on. In any conversation, there's a subtle shift in energy when two people feel like they're in sync. It's not about the words, it's about the space between them. You're sitting in a cafe with a colleague you don't know well, just starting to chat about a project. At first, the conversation feels a little stiff. You're sitting straight across from each other, making direct eye contact, which is fine, but something feels a little off. Without overthinking it, you shift your seat, turning your body just slightly to the side, so you're more at a diagonal than directly head-on. The difference is immediate. They shift too, without realizing it, mirroring your angle. Suddenly the flow feels smoother. You're no longer opponents across the table, but two people comfortably in the same space, sharing ideas without the pressure of facing each other directly. That's the beauty of sitting diagonally. The mind perceives direct confrontation as more intense, even if the conversation isn't tense. It's a subconscious barrier, but by positioning yourself at a slight angle, you reduce that feeling, making the conversation feel more relaxed. It signals to the brain that there's no threat. It's not a face-off, but a collaboration. You'll notice this in interviews, therapy sessions, even casual hangouts. When someone sits across from you but at an angle, it's less intimidating, more open, and the other person usually feels more at ease as a result. It's a small shift, but it makes a big difference in how people connect. You don't need to force comfort. Just adjust the angle and let the conversation settle into a more natural rhythm. Say their name at goodbye. The end of an interaction is often more important than the beginning. People remember the last thing you say, and how you make them feel right before they walk away can leave a lasting impression. It's a quiet evening, and you're wrapping up a casual dinner with a coworker. You've been talking for a couple of hours about everything and nothing. The evening's winding down, and you stand to leave. As you step toward the door, you say, "All right, thanks for dinner, Emily. It was great seeing you." As soon as you use her name, the moment shifts. She looks up, smiles a little wider, and gives you a warmer goodbye. It's like you've brought the connection full circle, anchoring it with something personal. Saying someone's name, especially at the end of an interaction, creates a subtle but powerful bond. It's a reminder that they've been heard, that they're seen. And when you say their name at goodbye, it lingers in their mind as a cue. This conversation mattered. The brain naturally responds to its own name. It grabs attention and makes the interaction feel personal and genuine. It's why good leaders, friends, and salespeople use names naturally in conversation. It signals that the relationship is real and not just transactional. This trick works because it's simple and human. In therapy, when a counselor uses a client's name before a session ends, it deepens the sense of connection. In negotiations, saying the other person's name can soften a deal. Even in parenting, using a child's name while saying goodbye can comfort them and build trust. Next time you part ways, don't just say, "See you later." Add their name to the goodbye and notice how it strengthens the moment. Fake a deadline to get faster results. You're sitting at your desk, your coworker across from you, scrolling through emails. You've been working on the same project for a while, but progress has stalled. There's no immediate pressure, but the task feels endless. You casually say, "Hey, I need to wrap this up by 3 p.m. Can you get that data together by then?" Your coworker nods, suddenly picking up the pace. They dig into their files, pulling things together with a sense of purpose. Before you know it, the task is done, and you realize the deadline you gave them wasn't real. It was just a prompt to make it happen faster. When we feel the weight of a deadline, real or not, the brain shifts into a higher gear. The feeling of urgency narrows focus, cutting out distractions. That rush of energy doesn't always come without a deadline, but when we think we have one, we're more likely to act decisively. This works in sales, when a salesperson creates the illusion of scarcity, and it works in your everyday work life. Even in relationships, creating a sense of time pressure can help move decisions forward. The trick isn't about deceiving people. It's about creating the mental environment that makes them act more decisively. You don't need to pressure someone. Sometimes, all it takes is creating a sense of time to encourage action. Raise eyebrows. When you see someone, you're walking down the hallway of your office, headed to the break room. As you pass a coworker, you make brief eye contact. For a split second, you raise your eyebrows, just enough to acknowledge them, then keep walking. They do the same, smiling lightly, a slight shift in their posture as they return the gesture. It's small, but something happens. Without saying a word, you both just shared a moment. That tiny, subtle lift of the eyebrows signals recognition, an unspoken acknowledgement that you see them. And in return, they're likely to feel just a little more connected to you. When we raise our eyebrows in greeting, it signals openness. It's not just a facial expression. It's a cue that we're available, that we're engaging with the person in front of us. The brain picks up on these signals immediately, creating a tiny bond. It's the same reason why a smile can make someone feel welcomed, but the raised eyebrow takes it a step further. It's not just warmth, it's recognition. This works in all sorts of social settings. In sales, a well-timed eyebrow raise can make a customer feel noticed and valued, even without words. In therapy, a therapist might use the gesture to show active listening. Even in personal relationships, it helps make people feel seen in a meaningful way. You don't have to say anything to make someone feel acknowledged. Sometimes a simple eyebrow raise can create an instant connection, giving the other person the unspoken message, "I see you, and I'm here." Use scarcity. Only a few people know this. You're sitting at a coffee shop, chatting with a friend about the latest trends in tech. They're intrigued by a new app you've been using, something that's making waves, but still a bit under the radar. As they ask how it works, you lean in slightly, lowering your voice just enough to make it feel like you're letting them in on a secret. Well, only a few people know about this app right now. It's still kind of exclusive, but it's going to be huge. Their eyes widen a little. They're suddenly more engaged. It's like you've just given them access to something special, and their interest skyrockets. Without even realizing it, you've activated a sense of scarcity, and it's making them more invested in what you're saying. Scarcity works because the brain is wired to respond to what's rare or limited. When something is framed as exclusive, the mind feels a subtle pressure to act quickly or risk missing out. It's not about being manipulative, but about tapping into a natural instinct we all share: the desire for what seems rare or in demand. This trick shows up everywhere. In sales, marketers know that saying "only a few left" increases urgency. In negotiations, when you hint that something is limited, the other party feels a stronger pull to close the deal. Even in casual conversation, mentioning that something is known by only a select group adds value to it in the listener's mind. When you frame information as rare or exclusive, people naturally want to be part of that group. They're more likely to lean in, listen closer, and value what you're offering. A little scarcity can turn a simple conversation into something far more compelling. Speak to pain, not logic. You're sitting across from a colleague in a meeting room. The presentation is about to start, but you sense there's resistance in the air. They've got their arms crossed, a slight frown, and they're checking their phone every few minutes. You launch into the benefits of the new project, detailing timelines, efficiency gains, and cost savings. But as you speak, you see their attention wandering, their body language closed off. Then, without missing a beat, you shift. I know we're all overwhelmed with deadlines right now, and adding another project might feel like too much. But imagine trying to meet your targets without this tool. It's only going to make things harder. The frustration of not having it will pile up, and we'll all be scrambling at the last minute. Suddenly their posture softens. They stop scrolling. They look at you. You've spoken to the pain, not the logic. People make decisions based on emotions, not logic. The brain responds faster to feelings of discomfort, fear, or frustration than it does to rational arguments. When you speak to the pain, the immediate concerns and frustrations, it shifts the mindset. They stop thinking about numbers and start thinking about how the situation will affect them. This technique works in sales when you focus on what's at stake for the customer, in negotiations when you highlight what could be lost, and even in relationships when you acknowledge a person's struggles rather than just presenting facts. Next time you need someone's attention or action, speak to what they feel, not just what they think. The emotional response is what drives change. Confess first, then ask. You're sitting in the living room of a friend's apartment, catching up on life. The evening's casual, but there's something you need from them. A favor you've been reluctant to ask. Instead of jumping right into it, you look at them and say, "I feel a little embarrassed to say this, but I need to be upfront. I've been falling behind on some things lately, and I could really use your help." They look at you with a more understanding expression, listening closely, not as an obligation, but because you've been honest about your own difficulty. Then you add, "So, I was hoping you might have some time to give me a hand with this." What's different now is the openness in the conversation. You've acknowledged your own challenge before making the request. It's not just about what you need, it's about how you present it. The vulnerability makes the ask feel more genuine, less transactional. This works because the brain responds to vulnerability with trust. When you confess first, You create a space where the other person doesn't feel pressured or caught off guard. They can process your need with empathy, and that shifts the dynamic from a simple favor to an opportunity to support someone they care about. In sales, this might show up when someone acknowledges a product's shortcomings before highlighting its benefits. In therapy, when a counselor shares a relatable story before asking about the client's experience. In relationships, when you open up before asking for something in return. When you confess first, the request becomes more meaningful. It's not about asking for help. It's about inviting someone to be part of something real. Let them correct you, then they trust you. You're sitting across from a colleague at a casual lunch, talking through an idea for an upcoming project. You mention a detail, something about the logistics, but they stop you mid-sentence. Actually, that's not quite right. The timing's a little different. Instead of brushing it off, you pause, smile lightly, and say, "Ah, good catch. Thanks for pointing that out." You let them take the lead in correcting you, and after a few more minutes of discussion, they start contributing more freely, offering suggestions and refining the project with you. By letting them correct you, you've created a space where they feel knowledgeable and respected. People are wired to trust those who allow them to contribute in meaningful ways, even if it's something small, like a correction. When you open the door for them to step in, you're subtly telling them that their input matters. This works because, psychologically, when someone corrects you, they feel more invested in the outcome. It's not just about them providing the right answer, it's about them taking ownership of the process, which creates a sense of partnership. The brain naturally builds trust when someone feels acknowledged for their expertise or insight. You'll see this in sales when a salesperson lets a client correct details about their needs, in therapy when a therapist lets a client steer the conversation, and in leadership when a leader invites team members to contribute their thoughts, even if it means correcting them. Allowing someone to correct you shows confidence, not weakness. It's an invitation to collaborate, and that's when trust truly grows. People don't just listen to you. They feel like they're part of the journey. Ask, what would you do? You're in a meeting, discussing a new project proposal with a colleague. There's tension in the air. Some details aren't adding up, and the conversation is starting to feel a little stuck. Rather than jumping into a solution or trying to push your own perspective, you pause and ask, what would you do if you were me? Your colleague blinks, clearly surprised by the question. They shift in their seat, process it for a moment, and then start outlining their thoughts. The tension loosens. Suddenly, they're thinking alongside you, from your position. The conversation feels more collaborative, as if you're solving the problem together. Asking, what would you do, works because it flips the usual dynamic. Instead of positioning yourself as the one who needs help, you put the other person in a position of responsibility, but not in a way that feels like pressure. It's subtle, but it invites them to offer something more thoughtful, more empathetic, because now they're not just offering advice, they're reflecting on what they would do in the same shoes. This approach creates a deeper connection and helps people feel more invested in the solution. They start thinking from a more personal place, and the answers tend to be more authentic. It's why it's so effective in negotiations, customer service, and even leadership. When you ask this question, you show respect for the other person's perspective and invite them to be a part of the solution. It's not about getting the right answer from them. It's about engaging them in a way that opens up real collaboration. Say most people don't know this. You're sitting at a casual dinner with a few colleagues and the conversation is flowing. Someone mentions a topic you know a lot about, but instead of jumping in with your expertise right away, you lean forward slightly and say, Most people don't know this, but everyone around the table immediately shifts their attention. It's not just what you're about to say, it's the way you've set it up. They feel like they're about to hear something exclusive, something others might not be aware of. The room quiets as you share the insight, and you can sense their genuine interest. The phrase, "most people don't know this," works because it triggers curiosity. It primes the brain to expect something valuable or surprising. People are wired to pay attention when they think they're about to learn something hidden or exclusive. The brain reacts by focusing on the speaker, creating a sense of importance around the information being shared. This tactic works in many situations. In sales, for example, using the phrase can subtly elevate a product, making it feel rare or special. In presentations, it can capture attention and make the audience eager to hear what's coming next. Even in everyday conversations, it sparks interest and encourages engagement. By simply adding that phrase, you've raised the stakes of the conversation without exaggerating. You've made the moment feel more significant, and people are naturally drawn in. It's not about tricking anyone. It's about tapping into a natural desire to uncover something new and meaningful. Next time you want to capture someone's attention or make your words stand out, try adding that simple phrase. It can make even the smallest detail feel worth paying attention to. Lower the volume to command silence. The world rarely slows down on its own, but there are subtle ways to coax it into a calmer rhythm. You're in the back seat of a cab, city lights sliding past fogged windows. Up front, the driver chats loudly into his phone, music crackling over the radio. Beside you, your friend leans forward and asks the driver a question, voice gentle, a notch softer than the surrounding noise. At first, nothing changes. But gradually, the driver's voice dips, music volume lowers, and the chaotic energy smooths into quiet harmony. The subtle shift draws everyone into an unspoken agreement of calm. Speaking softly amidst noise is an intuitive cue that nudges others toward quietness. When someone lowers their voice, listeners naturally lean in, unconsciously matching this calmer tone. It signals respect, intimacy, and confidence, inviting others to mirror the behavior without realizing it. Therapists often lower their voice to soothe tension. Negotiators quietly command rooms, and parents instinctively soften their tone to calm children. Lowering volume bypasses confrontation. It gently leads others into the quiet without resistance. The quieter voice naturally assumes control, not by overpowering, but by guiding attention inward, drawing the room closer and clearer. Loudness may demand notice, but softness inspires genuine listening and thoughtful response. In situations of escalating noise or tension, letting your voice slip quietly beneath the surface is often enough to reset the tone. It's not dominance, just a subtle invitation toward shared calm. Ask for help like a teammate. Asking isn't always easy. It carries uncertainty, vulnerability, even hesitation. But the way we ask can shape responses more than the request itself. You're in a small coffee shop, tucked at a corner table, laptop open, screen softly glowing. Across from you sits a co-worker, papers spread between you both. She pauses, hesitating, then gently leans forward. "Hey, I'm hitting a wall with these numbers," she murmurs calmly, gesturing toward the page. "Could we take a quick look together?" Her tone is easy, warm, less a request, more an invitation to collaborate. Without pause, you shift closer, examining the sheets side by side. Almost instinctively, you're engaged, invested, not merely assisting, but joining in. Moments later, solutions start taking shape, quietly forged by a subtle shift in her approach. The subtle effectiveness comes from how our minds perceive teamwork. When asked as a teammate rather than just a helper, people instinctively respond with openness and cooperation. The request becomes inclusive, dissolving resistance and activating shared responsibility. Therapists often encourage collaboration rather than giving advice outright. Skilled salespeople frame conversations as mutual explorations. Parents suggest teamwork to motivate children, and negotiators use inclusive language to foster partnership rather than opposition. Approaching others as teammates removes the pressure and creates quiet confidence. It shifts a request into a shared purpose, replacing reluctance with genuine engagement. In daily interactions, framing your need as a common goal gently shifts dynamics. It's not persuasion or manipulation. It's simply opening a door to genuine partnership. Pause before you answer equals authority. Confidence isn't always about speaking first or loudest. Often, quiet moments say much more. You're seated near the window of a cafe, sunlight softened through clouds. Nearby, two colleagues discuss a sensitive issue. One asks the other a tough question, expecting immediate clarification. Instead, the woman takes a slow sip of coffee, calmly setting her cup down. There's a brief, easy silence, just enough to shift the rhythm. Then, she responds clearly and deliberately, her words careful, thoughtful, assured. Without raising her voice, she's quietly taken command of the interaction. The atmosphere around their table subtly changes. Her opinion now holds more weight, her perspective more considered. That small pause before answering communicates in a calm and quiet authority. It signals that you value thoughtful reflection over hurried reactions, subtly demonstrating confidence and composure. When you pause thoughtfully, listeners intuitively perceive your response as more deliberate, measured, and credible. Therapists often use quiet pauses to allow clients space for deeper thought. Negotiators lean on silence to underscore sincerity. Parents pause to reinforce authority without confrontation. And skilled salespeople give breathing room after questions, allowing trust and respect to form naturally. This brief silence helps frame your thoughts clearly, amplifying the value of what follows. It shows you're comfortable enough to hold a moment's uncertainty, letting your authority quietly assert itself through steady composure rather than hurried words. In everyday interactions, silence isn't emptiness. It's a gentle space, carefully created, quietly reinforcing your presence and credibility without ever needing to raise your voice. Act like you already belong. Comfort and belonging don't come from waiting to be welcomed. They often begin quietly within you. Sunlight drapes warmly through the bookstore cafe window, brushing across polished tables and neatly stacked novels. At a corner booth, a woman quietly settles into her seat, placing her bag down with easy assurance. Nearby, an informal book club gathers, members shifting comfortably in conversation. Without hesitation, she gently leans into their dialogue, seamlessly adding thoughts about the novel they've opened. There's no introduction, no anxious apology, just the natural cadence of someone who already fits. After a momentary pause, the circle widens subtly, chairs shifting slightly outward, words warmly inclusive. In a matter of minutes, she's indistinguishable from the rest, part of the gentle hum of shared connection. This subtle ease works because belonging isn't always granted, it's often recognized. When you carry yourself as though you already belong, you quietly signal confidence and assurance. People instinctively respond to this calm, accepting presence, sensing an absence of hesitation or uncertainty. It's why skilled negotiators speak with quiet authority. Therapists foster connections through genuine comfort, and why the best salespeople naturally merge into conversations. Even parents, when joining their children in play rather than interrupting it, find smoother pathways to deeper relationships. By quietly acting as if you already belong, you dissolve invisible barriers. People respond to your comfort as permission, inviting you into spaces effortlessly, almost unconsciously. Belonging isn't loud or forceful. It's the gentle, intuitive choice to step softly into new moments, understanding that acceptance doesn't always need formal invitations. It simply follows ease and quiet confidence. Make eye contact. Just 1 second longer. Trust isn't built by words alone. Often it quietly forms in moments between them. You're standing at a grocery checkout late in the evening. Items glide forward rhythmically on the conveyor as the cashier mechanically scans each product. Reaching your turn, you quietly greet her. As she finishes scanning, you ask how her shift has been, holding her gaze softly, just a second longer than usual. Her eyes hesitate briefly in surprise, lingering thoughtfully. In that extra heartbeat of eye contact, her tiredness shifts subtly into warmth, breaking the routine of mechanical politeness. A gentle openness emerges between you, an authentic moment of human connection quietly forged by one extended glance. Extending eye contact by even a single moment invites trust because it signals genuine interest and openness. Instinctively, people sense sincerity when eyes hold theirs slightly longer than expected. Therapists use this subtle pause to encourage openness, gently signaling they're fully present. Salespeople harness it naturally to create instant rapport. Negotiators quietly build trust, and parents reassure children with steady, meaningful eye contact. This simple gesture fosters an atmosphere of understanding and respect, enhancing every interaction without words. Holding someone's gaze a bit longer isn't about dominance or power, it's quiet affirmation, gently communicating respect and genuine care. It's an instinctive cue recognized universally, a small yet profound signal that you're fully present, truly listening, deeply connected. Real communication often lies in silent spaces rather than spoken sentences. Allowing eye contact to linger softly bridges distances that words alone can't, quietly transforming ordinary moments into genuine connections. Use anchoring. Mention a big number. First, perception shapes reality quietly, often in ways we hardly notice. You're at your neighborhood cafe, mid-morning sunlight warming the space gently. At a table nearby, two friends are discussing holiday plans. One friend leans forward thoughtfully, mentioning how flights to their destination were initially priced around $1,200. The other friend's eyes widen slightly at the mention of this figure. A brief pause hangs softly between them. Then calmly, she adds that she'd recently seen tickets for about $500. Instantly, the atmosphere shifts, relief and interest spreading visibly across her friend's face. Without pressure, the conversation eases comfortably toward planning the trip, the second number now feeling surprisingly reasonable. This subtle technique works naturally because our minds anchor onto initial information we hear, using it as a reference point. Mentioning a larger number first gently shapes expectations, allowing smaller figures that follow to feel significantly more appealing. Therapists gently introduce difficult concepts before simpler ones, guiding clients into comfort zones. Salespeople frame initial high prices to highlight subsequent discounts. Negotiators reference ambitious demands to make realistic offers attractive. and parents occasionally mention bigger tasks before smaller requests, softening resistance from children. Anchoring isn't manipulation. It's quietly guiding perception toward comfort and agreement. By starting with a higher number, you effortlessly recalibrate expectations, fostering openness without conflict. Our choices often flow from quiet, unnoticed moments. Introducing ideas gently, with strategic subtlety, can transform resistance into ease, softly steering interactions toward mutual understanding without force or friction. Sit on the edge of your seat equals engagement signal. Late afternoon sunlight fills the small waiting area at the neighborhood bus stop. Nearby, two friends sit talking softly, their conversation blending gently into the sounds of traffic. At first, they're both leaning back casually, voices low and relaxed. Then, one friend shifts subtly forward, elbows gently resting on her knees, leaning in slightly. Almost immediately, the other friend responds instinctively, mirroring her posture and tone. Their voices lower, the conversation becoming quietly energized. Each word met with greater attention, each thought absorbed a little deeper. Without saying a word about it, her subtle movement has silently conveyed genuine care and interest, drawing her companion into deeper engagement. This quiet shift to the seat's edge works naturally because our minds instinctively interpret subtle posture changes as signals of authentic interest. Leaning slightly forward indicates openness and active participation. We sense intuitively when someone cares enough to physically move closer. It's why therapists often lean gently forward during sessions, quietly encouraging openness. Salespeople subtly shift toward customers, signaling genuine interest. Parents intuitively lean toward children to comfort and connect, and negotiators use this posture to silently communicate sincere attention and respect. Sitting closer to the edge isn't merely a physical movement. It's a quiet signal that you're fully present and genuinely engaged. It transforms interactions subtly, fostering an unspoken trust, connection, and mutual attentiveness. Body language can softly reshape a moment without words, gently creating an environment of true presence and deeper human connection. Count to 3. Before responding to emotion. Emotions flow quickly, often faster than our thoughts can comfortably follow. But sometimes, clarity lives within the pause between feeling and speaking. You're in line at your local grocery store checkout, the soft hum of scanners providing a gentle rhythm. Ahead, a cashier mistakenly scans an item twice. The customer notices and sharply snaps at her, irritation rising quickly. Instead of immediately reacting, the cashier pauses, silently taking a slow, calm breath. 3 quiet seconds drift past, just long enough to allow the tension to loosen its grip. Then she softly apologizes, her voice steady and composed, effortlessly guiding the moment from agitation back to ease. The customer's shoulders drop slightly, irritation giving way to calm. The entire exchange shifts quietly toward understanding. Allowing yourself 3 seconds before responding to heightened emotions gives the mind space to gently regain balance. This brief, intentional pause prevents hasty reactions and diffuses potential conflicts naturally. It's a simple, intuitive approach therapists encourage in emotional discussions. Negotiators rely on it to keep dialogue productive. Parents instinctively use it to manage children's outbursts calmly. And skilled salespeople employ it to patiently navigate challenging interactions. That tiny delay isn't about suppressing feelings, but gently creating space for thoughtful clarity. It quietly transforms volatile moments into opportunities for genuine connection and mutual respect. Often, the smallest adjustments in timing quietly change the nature of our interactions, shifting conversations from conflict toward understanding, simply by allowing emotions to soften naturally before we speak. What's your story? Not what do you do. Connections deepen when we invite the person, not just the label, into the conversation. You're seated on a bench at a train platform. A man sits a few feet away, well-dressed, briefcase balanced against his leg. The two of you exchange a nod, then a few quiet words about the delayed train. There's a natural pause. Then you ask, not too directly, not too casually, "So, what's your story?" He looks at you, slightly surprised, but not put off. After a moment, he smiles faintly and says, "That's a big question," before slowly beginning to speak. Not about his job, not about his title, but about moving cities, leaving something behind, the feeling of starting over. The train arrives, but the air between you feels lighter, more human, as if something real briefly passed between two strangers. Asking someone what they do narrows the focus. It places them in a category: teacher, engineer, student, unemployed. And the conversation tends to stay there, boxed in. But asking someone about their story does the opposite. It opens things up. It tells them you're curious about them, not just their role. In therapy, questions like this help people step out of fixed identities. In negotiation, it breaks the ice. Parents learn more by asking about a child's day this way. Even in sales or hiring, it shifts the dynamic from evaluation to understanding. When we drop the script and let someone bring their own, something changes. Stories invite honesty. They allow for texture, history, even contradiction. And in that space, real conversation begins. Sometimes the best way to understand someone isn't to define them, but to give them the room to unfold. Plant ideas as questions. Guiding someone's thinking doesn't always require persuasion. Sometimes it just needs the right kind of question. You're in a quiet office meeting room, late afternoon. The conversation has slowed. Across the table, a colleague hesitates about taking on a new project. He lists the risks: too much workload, unclear deadlines, past failures. Rather than push back, you sit for a moment and ask, what would it look like if you actually led this one? Your tone is neutral, almost casual, but something in the way the question lands makes him pause. He leans back, looking slightly upward, not defensive, just curious. Without resistance, he begins to consider it. Not because he was told to, but because the idea now feels like his to explore. Framing suggestions as questions invites the other person's mind to move voluntarily rather than reactively. It softens resistance and engages curiosity. When you make a statement, people often instinctively evaluate or argue. But when you ask a question, especially one that subtly carries an idea, they're more likely to process it on their own terms. Therapists use this to help clients reflect without defensiveness. In negotiation, questions shift tone from confrontation to exploration. Parents guide choices more smoothly this way, and in sales, a well-placed question can be more convincing than any pitch. You're not forcing agreement. You're simply offering a frame, a doorway, not a direction. And when the idea feels like it came from within, the mind is more likely to engage with it fully. That's the quiet strength of a question shaped with care. Show micro-vulnerability, then strength. In a quiet office break room, two co-workers sit at the far end of a long table. One of them, newer to the team, glances over between sips of coffee. "I thought I totally bombed that client call this morning," she says with a small shrug. her tone calm but honest. The other looks up, surprised by the openness. But before he can respond, she adds, "I went back over the notes during lunch and made a revised pitch plan. I think it's solid." Her words land differently than if she just shared the fix. By first naming a doubt, however briefly, her confidence feels earned, not rehearsed. That small act of micro-vulnerability, naming a moment of doubt, frustration or uncertainty, creates a space where others feel invited in, not shut out. It lowers defenses, opens ears, and makes the next thing you say feel more trustworthy. When followed by a calm statement of direction or strength, it draws others in instead of pushing them away. Therapists model this in sessions to help clients open up. Parents use it to teach resilience without sounding superior. In leadership, it creates authentic authority. In sales, it can soften skepticism without losing credibility. Revealing a flicker of something real, not as drama but as fact, lets the strength that follows feel steady and human. People respond better to confidence that has roots. Letting others see both your footing and where you nearly slipped doesn't weaken the message, it makes it more believable, because what's quiet and real tends to carry further than what's polished and perfect. Don't interrupt. They'll think you're brilliant. Silence can do more than fill space. It can change how you're seen. In a quiet corner of a co-working space, two colleagues sit side by side, laptops closed. One of them, clearly frustrated, begins explaining an issue with a project, something about timelines, a missed email, and the sense that no one's on the same page. The other just listens. No nodding, no jumping in, no well-meaning solutions halfway through the sentence. Just a steady, thoughtful presence. After a while, the first one stops, exhales, then says with a small laugh, "I'm not even sure if that all made sense." The listener finally speaks, slow and calm. "It did," and then adds a brief, focused idea. One sentence that ties it all together. It lands perfectly. The moment feels sharp, earned, and effortless. Holding back when someone's speaking, especially when you think you already know what they'll say, creates something rare, a sense of weight. When you let them finish, their words feel respected. And when you finally speak, your voice carries more clarity, more calm, and more impact. In therapy, that kind of listening creates safety. In negotiation, it signals patience and confidence. In parenting, it builds trust. And in sales or team leadership, it draws people in without pressure. Not interrupting isn't about being passive. It's about being deliberate. It frames you as thoughtful, as someone who thinks before speaking, someone who's paying real attention. You don't have to say much to sound smart. Sometimes it's the restraint, the quiet discipline that does the talking for you. Leave before it peaks. Lasting impressions aren't shaped by how long something lasts. They're shaped by when it ends. You're sitting on a rooftop during a small get-together, early evening, warm breeze in the air. Laughter circles the table, drinks clink gently, and the energy feels easy, natural. A story lands perfectly. Everyone laughs in unison, the kind of moment that feels effortless. You glance around, take a breath, and quietly stand. "I've got an early morning," you say with a smile, grabbing your jacket. There's a brief chorus of surprise, mild protest even, but it fades quickly into well wishes and appreciation. As you leave, the feeling you carry with you is full, not stretched. That was enough. And for everyone else? The night now ends on its high note. Our minds don't average every moment. We remember the emotional peak and the end. So when we leave at the right moment, We frame the memory with energy and clarity. In therapy, it helps close a session in a way that sticks. In parenting, ending an activity before boredom hits keeps kids asking for more. In sales, ending a pitch just after the strongest point keeps interest high. Even in relationships, timing when to exit a moment can shape how you're remembered. Leaving while things are still going well takes restraint, but it lets the moment live on unspoiled. You're not abandoning the experience. You're preserving its best version. It's not about controlling the story. It's about respecting its rhythm. Ending things just before they peak isn't avoidance. It's quiet precision that lets the best part echo longer. Keep hands visible at all times. Trust often begins before a word is spoken, sometimes with something as simple as where your hands are. You're seated across from someone at a small table in a shared workspace. It's your first time collaborating, and the conversation is still finding its rhythm. As you speak, your hands stay lightly rested on the table, moving gently as you explain an idea. When they speak, you listen fully, hands open, still visible, not tucked under the table or hidden in your lap. Gradually, the other person relaxes. They begin to mirror your calm. The pauses between you start to feel easier. The mood shifts from formal to familiar. Nothing big changed, but something settled. We're wired to scan for safety cues, especially in early interactions. Visible hands signal openness, honesty, and a lack of threat. They keep the conversation grounded in something non-verbal but deeply human. Therapists consciously keep their hands where clients can see them. Sales professionals avoid crossing arms or pocketing hands during pitches. In parenting, keeping gestures open helps children stay calm and attentive. Even in high-stakes negotiation, hands on the table can do more than a well-crafted argument. It's not about exaggerated movements or forced gestures, just letting your presence feel fully available. When your hands are in sight, your intentions feel easier to read, and when people can read you, they trust you more. Sometimes the smallest cues do the heaviest lifting. Keeping your hands visible doesn't just shape how others see you, it shapes how safe they feel being seen. Use open gestures to invite openness. Conversations open up more easily when nothing in your body says closed. It's late afternoon in a library's quiet common area. Two students sit across from each other at a shared table, papers spread loosely between them. One of them leans back slightly, arms relaxed at his sides, palms occasionally gesturing outward as he speaks. His voice is calm, but it's the way he carries himself, unfolded, unguarded, that keeps the space between them feeling light. The other student, initially a bit reserved, begins to lean in. Her voice warms, questions come more freely, and something shifts. The dialogue feels easier now, less like effort, more like exchange. Open gestures, those small, visible movements that avoid crossing arms or turning inward, quietly invite trust. When we physically signal that we're not guarding ourselves, others feel safer stepping forward. In therapy, counselors use gentle, open posture to create a climate where clients feel safe to speak. In negotiations, a calm, open gesture at just the right moment can diffuse tension without a word. Teachers guide classroom energy with the sweep of a hand. Parents soften resistance simply by adjusting the way they sit or reach. The mind watches the body, and it watches other bodies too. We take subtle cues from posture, from hand placement, from the direction of a glance. When those signals say, "I'm not closed," it allows the other person to stop bracing and start participating. You don't need big movements or rehearsed body language. Just enough openness to show you're not protecting yourself from the conversation. That's what opens the door for someone else to walk through. Turn the chair slightly toward them. Connection often begins with where your body points, even before a single word is spoken. It's early evening in a hotel lounge, dim lighting, quiet music. Two co-workers are seated nearby after a long day of meetings. One of them sinks back into their chair, angled slightly away, legs crossed, phone still in hand. The other, without comment, turns their chair a few degrees, not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to face the conversation. They rest one arm lightly on the side, body open, attention undivided. Slowly, the first one puts the phone down. Their posture shifts. Words come more easily. The tension begins to melt, replaced with a quiet, mutual ease. That small movement, the angle of a chair, says more than it seems. It communicates interest, respect, and presence without needing to explain anything. Our minds constantly scan for signals about whether we're being welcomed or held at a distance. When your body angles towards someone, even slightly, it creates an unspoken invitation. Therapists arrange chairs this way to build warmth and safety. Negotiators use this positioning to reduce friction without saying a word. Parents often notice that turning toward a child, not just looking, invites more cooperation. In leadership or sales, it's the difference between talking at someone and being with them. You don't need perfect posture or polished words, just a quiet physical signal that says, "You have my attention." And sometimes, that's all it takes for the rest of the conversation to unfold. It's not about making a moment bigger. It's about allowing it to land without resistance. A simple shift in position can do more for trust than anything you say after. Let them say no to feeling control. Control isn't always taken. It's something we often need to feel before we're willing to move forward. It's a slow afternoon in a hardware store. A young man stands near the checkout, scanning a list on his phone. An older employee walks over, polite but not intrusive. "You probably don't need help, do you?" he says with a small smile, nodding at the list. The younger man laughs quietly. "No, I'm good." Then glances at the shelves, hesitates, and adds, "Actually, where's the cork?" The exchange is casual, unforced. The invitation to decline didn't shut the door, it opened it. Giving someone the room to say no often makes them more willing to say yes. It restores their sense of choice, even if the outcome doesn't change. When people feel pressured, even gently, they instinctively resist, pulling back just to preserve agency. But when you offer a clear out, you let them feel safe. Parents use this when asking for cooperation. "Do you want to clean your room now or in 10 minutes? Salespeople frame requests as optional. "Would it be crazy to take a look at this today?" Therapists open conversations with, "Tell me if this doesn't feel right." In all these cases, saying no first allows the other person to re-engage on their own terms. It's not about manipulation. It's about letting someone protect their space so they can choose to open it. Sometimes influence doesn't come from pushing forward. It comes from stepping back, just enough for the other person to feel like they're still steering. That shift in tone is often all it takes. You probably already know this. Validation can be more persuasive than instruction, especially when it feels like you're offering a reminder, not a correction. Late afternoon, fluorescent lights hum in a quiet office conference room. Two co-workers sit across from each other, reviewing a draft. One of them pauses, noticing a part that feels off. Instead of launching into a fix, she says gently, "You probably already know this, but this section could land a little smoother." The tone is soft, low pressure. Her colleague nods, not defensive, just thoughtful. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, he says, and starts making notes. There's no resistance, just agreement, because it didn't feel like critique. It felt like collaboration. That phrase, you probably already know this, works because it preserves ego while gently inviting change. It gives the other person credit before offering input, lowering their defenses. When people feel respected, they're more likely to consider your perspective. In therapy, this language is used to ease someone into a difficult truth. In parenting, it avoids pushback. In sales, it allows new information to land without sounding like a correction. In negotiation, it frames ideas without creating conflict. And in leadership, it softens feedback into something easier to receive. You're not talking down, you're leveling with them. The message still gets across, but it arrives with dignity attached. Often it's not what you say, it's how gently you place it in their hands. Leading with respect turns advice into affirmation, and that's when people are most open to hearing what comes next. Ask them to teach you something. Everyone wants to feel valued, but the easiest way to give that feeling is often overlooked. In a quiet copy room at the end of the hallway, two co-workers stand by the printer, waiting. One glances at the machine and mutters something about always jamming on the third tray. The other looks over, curious. You seem to actually know how this thing works, he says. Can you show me what to do if it gets stuck? There's no sarcasm, no flattery, just a sincere question. The first co-worker lights up a little, not visibly, but enough to shift the tone. He steps in with quiet confidence, walking through the process. What began as a dull wait becomes a moment of informal connection. Not because they had a deep conversation, but because one asked the other to share what they knew. Asking someone to teach you something, even something small, gives them a subtle sense of importance. It tells them you're listening, that their knowledge matters. And that kind of invitation, small, sincere, is powerful. In therapy, it can build trust when a client is asked to explain what's helped them cope. In parenting, it gives kids a moment to feel capable. Salespeople use this to shift authority toward the client. In leadership, it makes space for others to step forward without being asked directly. Letting someone teach you doesn't lower your status. It raises theirs. And that small shift changes how they see you and how they show up around you. Sometimes the easiest way to be respected is to offer respect first, not through praise, but through curiosity. Letting someone explain something they know is often the quietest way to say, I see you. When nervous, help someone else. Anxiety narrows your focus inward, but sometimes the quickest way to steady yourself is to shift that focus outward. It's early morning outside a conference hall. A woman stands alone by the wall, nervously scrolling through her phone, waiting for a panel to begin. Across the room, someone struggles with a name tag, fumbling with the pin, clearly annoyed but trying not to show it. She notices. After a brief pause, she walks over. Need a hand? She asks. He looks relieved, thanks her, and they share a short laugh. It's nothing dramatic, just a small gesture. But when she returns to her spot, something has changed. Her hands are steadier. Her breath feels easier. The tension hasn't vanished, but it's no longer in charge. Nervousness makes the world shrink around us. Our attention turns inward. Heart rate, thoughts, self-judgment. But the mind is built to engage with others, and helping someone, even briefly, shifts the mental spotlight. It tells the body, I'm not in danger. I'm useful. That shift doesn't eliminate nerves, but it interrupts their grip. In parenting, Anxious kids often calm down when they're asked to help with a task. In high-pressure sales, experienced professionals reset by asking questions or offering assistance. Therapists teach grounding techniques that involve focusing on someone else's need. The benefit isn't just distraction, it's purpose. Helping gives the nervous energy a job. It keeps the body moving and the mind steady without forcing calm. Confidence doesn't always start inside. Sometimes it starts by reaching out, even in a small way, and letting that moment anchor you back to yourself. Use future pacing. Imagine if a man and his teenage son sit at the edge of a park bench, takeaway coffees in hand. The boy stares at the pavement, uncertain, talking in circles about whether he should apply for an internship. "I'll probably mess up the interview," he says quietly. His dad listens, then leans back slightly and asks, "Imagine if you actually got the spot. What would your first day look like?" There's a pause. The boy doesn't answer right away, but something in his posture changes. His eyes lift slightly. "I guess I'd be nervous," he says, "but I think I'd feel kind of proud." The conversation moves forward, one small imagined scene at a time. Asking someone to picture the future, especially with the words "imagine if," bypasses their defenses. It opens the door without asking them to walk through it. It's not a command. It's not a pitch. It's a quiet invitation to see themselves in a better place. The moment they do, even briefly, the choice becomes theirs, not yours. Therapists use it to help clients visualize life beyond a problem. Salespeople use it to make benefits feel personal. Parents use it to help kids picture consequences or rewards. Even in negotiation, it moves minds toward possibility, not pressure. It isn't about creating certainty. It's about creating a moment where change feels less foreign and just real enough to consider. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do isn't to prove your point. It's to let someone quietly try it on for themselves. Be the first to apologize in conflict. Tension doesn't always break on its own. Sometimes someone has to go first. In the back office of a small bookstore, two co-workers are putting away inventory. The conversation is stiff. Short replies, minimal eye contact. They had a disagreement the day before, something small that grew louder than it should have. As the silence stretches, one of them quietly sets a box down and says, "I know I got defensive yesterday. I was already on edge, but that's no excuse. I'm sorry." The other pauses, surprised. Then, just as quietly, nods. "Yeah, I didn't handle it well either." The tone softens. They keep working, but the air feels different now. Lighter, settled. Apologizing first isn't about taking the full blame. It's about showing you're willing to step off the battlefield. When conflict hardens both sides, the first apology signals safety. It pulls things out of the emotional deadlock. Even a small gesture, "I shouldn't have raised my voice," or "I could have handled that better," is often enough to let the other person relax their guard. In parenting, it models accountability and resets connection. In negotiation, it diffuses standoffs. In leadership, it builds trust. And in close relationships, it shortens unnecessary distance. The strength of an early apology is that it doesn't depend on being right. It depends on being ready. It doesn't always matter who started it. What often matters more is who ends it. And the first to say sorry is usually the first to take their hands off the wall between you. Ask for opinions, not answers. Advice can feel heavy, but asking for someone's opinion? That opens a different kind of door. Late morning in a shared office kitchen, two co-workers stand by the sink, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. One of them turns, holding a printed draft of a proposal. "I'm not sure what to do with the structure here," she says, flipping to the second page. "What's your opinion on this layout?" The other looks it over, relaxes a bit, and starts talking. Not cautiously, not like he's solving a puzzle, but conversationally. They bounce ideas back and forth for a few minutes. No pressure, no performance, just a quiet flow that somehow sharpens the idea without either of them forcing it. Asking for an opinion, rather than a direct answer, gives someone room to think without feeling cornered. It shows that you value their perspective, not just their correctness. That shift in tone makes it easier for people to open up, to share without filtering. Therapists often invite opinions to help clients reflect safely. In parenting, asking kids what they think makes them feel heard, not tested. In negotiation, it turns tension into dialogue. In sales, it keeps conversations human instead of transactional. When you ask for an answer, someone has to be right. When you ask for an opinion, they just have to be honest. The best conversations often begin where certainty steps aside. Invite perspective, not just solutions, and you'll find people are more willing to meet you where you are. And from there, better thinking happens on both sides. Use even if to overcome doubt. Doubt doesn't always need to be erased. Sometimes it just needs to be outgrown. In a quiet hallway outside a conference room, two colleagues speak in low voices. One of them hesitates near the door, arms crossed, voice tight. "I'm not ready to present this," she says. "What if they tear it apart?" The other nods, not pushing, then gently says, "Even if they do, you'll still have something stronger than what you started with." That pause softens the tension. She exhales, then nods. It's not that the fear disappeared, it's that it lost its grip. Doubt works like a trap door. Once we imagine something going wrong, we fall into trying to avoid it completely. But when you add the phrase "even if," you shift the frame. You're not pretending failure isn't possible. You're shrinking its power. It tells the mind, yes, that might happen, but we'll still move forward. In therapy, this helps reframe fear without denying it. In sales, it quiets objections. Even if you only use it once a week, it still saves time. In parenting, it reassures kids without invalidating their concerns. And in leadership, it builds calm under pressure. Even if the rollout stumbles, we've got support lined up. Skepticism fades when it feels safe to exist without being in charge. Even if doesn't argue with doubt. It calmly makes room for it, then steps past it. Sometimes reassurance doesn't come from denying what could go wrong. It comes from remembering that you're still okay if it does. Act like you forgot they're famous. Fame creates distance, but it doesn't take much to bring things back to eye level. It's a quiet airport lounge, early morning. A man sits alone with a book, hoodie up, baseball cap low. He's recognizable, but not being approached. Across from him, a middle-aged woman sets down her tea and glances over. "You mind if I sit here?" she asks plainly. He nods. A few minutes pass, then she leans forward slightly. "That book any good?" He pauses, looks up, smiles a little. "Yeah, actually." The conversation drifts into authors, long flights, bad coffee. Not once does she mention his name, his career, or anything outside the moment. When she leaves, he tells her, "Thanks." That was the most normal conversation I've had in a while. When someone is used to being treated differently, the most disarming thing you can do is not join in. Ignoring the pedestal gives them room to step off it. This doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It means speaking to the person, not the spotlight. In sales, this diffuses pressure. In interviews, it builds rapport. In negotiations, it brings authority figures into a shared space. Even in parenting, treating older kids like real collaborators rather than performers or students creates mutual respect. People relax when they're no longer performing, and the fastest way to get someone to drop the act is to stop clapping. Treating someone like they're just another person in the room doesn't diminish them. It dignifies the interaction. And in most cases, that's what they were hoping for anyway. Mention a mutual interest, not a person. Not every connection starts with who you know. Often, it starts with what you care about. In a corporate elevator, two people stand in silence, one clutching a notebook, the other scrolling through their phone. They've passed each other in the hallway before, but have never spoken. As the elevator doors close, the one with the notebook glances over and says, "Is that the new season of that finance podcast? I've been meaning to catch up." The person with the phone looks up, surprised, then nods. "Yeah, it's actually pretty good. They did a whole segment on behavioral investing this week." The tone shifts. The silence fills with something warmer. No awkward introductions. No reaching for shared acquaintances. Just an idea they both recognize. Mentioning a shared interest, not a mutual contact, creates an equal starting point. It doesn't rely on social networks or circles of influence. It leans on curiosity, on value. It gives the other person something to respond to that isn't filtered through status or relationships. In sales, it lets you skip the name dropping and build trust through relevance. In therapy, it creates safety through common ground. In parenting, focusing on a shared project often works better than invoking authority. In leadership, it invites collaboration rather than hierarchy. When you lead with "I know them," it can come off as leverage. But when you lead with "I like this," you offer something lighter, an invitation, not a calculation. That one point of mutual interest, even small, can turn the moment from distant to real. Because the fastest way to connect isn't through someone else. It's by meeting right where you both already are. Laugh slightly before your joke. Humor doesn't always land because of what you say. It lands because of how gently you set it down. At a late lunch in a nearly empty cafe, two co-workers sit across from each other, picking at their salads between meetings. The conversation is slow, slightly tense, still recovering from a disagreement earlier in the week. One of them, stirring a bit of dressing with her fork, says with a half smile and a short breath of laughter, "I think this place uses sarcasm instead of salt." The other looks up, pauses, then laughs, genuinely this time. The energy between them softens, not because the joke was brilliant, but because it felt safe. The laugh came before the punchline, and that changed everything. A slight laugh before a joke doesn't just signal humor, it signals intention. It gives people permission to laugh with you rather than risk misunderstanding. The pre-laugh makes the moment warmer, more collaborative. It tells the listener, this is meant lightly. Parents use it instinctively when trying to reset tension. In therapy, humor is often introduced gently like this, to ease into difficult topics. In sales or leadership, soft laughter can relax a room without losing professionalism. Even in a first date or casual setting, that little breath of amusement helps jokes feel shared, not risky. You're not laughing at your own joke. You're giving it a soft landing. You're building the laugh together. Humor isn't just delivery, it's invitation. And a small laugh before the line can quietly tell someone, it's okay to smile now. Let silence sit just 1 second too long. Stillness can speak louder than any response, if you let it last just a moment longer than what feels comfortable. In a small meeting room with a window cracked open to late morning traffic, two people sit across from each other. One has just finished explaining a mistake, something small but avoidable. The other listens, then says nothing. Not right away, just holds eye contact for a breath longer than expected. The silence lingers. The speaker shifts slightly in their chair, then, unprompted, adds more. What happened before, what they would have done differently, and how they'll fix it. The conversation continues with clarity, not because of pressure, just because space was left open for truth to arrive. Letting silence sit for a second too long doesn't create awkwardness. It creates gravity. The mind fills space, and when you give someone the floor without rushing to fill it, they often keep talking. Not because you ask them to, but because something in that pause invites more. Therapists use this to help people go deeper. Skilled negotiators let silence draw out concessions. Parents hold it to guide reflection. In interviews, silence encourages honesty. In conflict, it often softens tension more than quick replies ever could. That pause tells the other person, I'm not in a rush. I'm not moving past this. I'm here with you. Keep going. We're often taught to respond quickly, to manage the silence, but when you trust it, just for a moment longer, you give the other person a space to unfold. And in that extra second, things you didn't expect are often quietly revealed. Use their words in your reply. Understanding often starts by showing that you've heard, not just listened, but heard. In a shared workspace, two colleagues pause near the window during a break. One of them, frustrated, says, I just feel like no one's really backing the idea. It's like I'm presenting in a vacuum. The other nods, then replies, so it's the vacuum part that's hitting the hardest, not just disagreement, but silence. The first one looks up, slightly surprised. Yeah, exactly. The tone shifts. They're not just venting anymore, they're unpacking something together. Repeating someone's own words in your reply, even just a few of them, has a grounding effect. It reassures the other person that you're not just waiting to talk, you're tracking their meaning step by step. It creates a small emotional mirror. In therapy, this builds trust quickly. In parenting, echoing a child's phrase calms tension and helps them feel seen. In sales, reflecting language back to the client confirms understanding. In negotiations, it slows things down and diffuses pushback. It's not about flattery or mimicry. It's about recognition. We all speak in our own rhythm. And when someone echoes part of that rhythm back, the conversation becomes easier to trust. It doesn't take much, just a sentence that hands their words back to them, shaped with care. That's often enough to make someone feel like the conversation is theirs too. And when they feel that, they start saying what really matters. Never break eye contact while listening. Presence isn't always shown by what you say. Often, it's revealed by what you don't look away from. In a quiet office, just after hours, a junior employee lingers at the doorway. Her manager, still packing up, invites her to sit. She hesitates, then begins speaking, carefully, cautiously, about something that's been bothering her. The tone is quiet, the words uncertain. But the manager doesn't interrupt. He doesn't glance at his phone, or the clock, or the bag he's still halfway zipped. He just watches her speak, attentively, eyes steady. Nothing forceful, just full presence. By the time she finishes, her voice is clearer. She looks relieved. Not because the problem is solved, but because she didn't feel alone while saying it. Holding eye contact while listening tells the other person their words don't need to fight for space. It gives them proof that you're not only hearing them, you're staying with them. And when someone knows you won't flinch or drift away, they say more. Therapists rely on it to build safety. Salespeople use it to calm hesitation. Parents use it to show their kids that even the difficult parts of a conversation won't drive them away. In negotiations or conflict, steady eye contact becomes a quiet anchor. It says, "I'm not leaving this moment just because it's uncomfortable." You don't need to stare. You just need to stay. Eyes on them. Fully there. When you listen without breaking eye contact, you give more than attention. You give steadiness. And in the middle of an uncertain sentence, that's often what someone needs most. Touch the table to anchor. Attention. In conversations that drift, attention rarely returns on its own. But sometimes it only takes one small, steady gesture to pull it back. Late afternoon in a midtown coffee shop, two friends sit at a corner table, one of them halfway through explaining something important, about work, or maybe something deeper. The other is listening, but also glancing at the barista, the street, the cup in front of them. The first speaker, mid-sentence, gently places a hand on the table. Not dramatic, just flat, grounded, quiet. The movement is almost nothing, but it lands. The other's gaze comes back. The conversation sharpens. What follows lands more clearly. They're both fully in it now. Touching the table acts as a subtle cue, not just to others, but to yourself. It signals presence. The rhythm of conversation can be fragile, especially in meetings, interviews, even family dinners. A grounded hand gives the words a place to live. Therapists sometimes use it during tense moments to recenter the space. Salespeople anchor attention with a light gesture at just the right time. In parenting, it helps children feel secure during conversations that might otherwise drift or escalate. And in tough discussions, it adds quiet weight to whatever is being said. You're not slamming the table, you're anchoring it, your body saying, "This matters," without ever interrupting. Words get heard more clearly when the body stays still with purpose, and a calm hand resting on the surface between you can quietly tell the room, "Come back to this." Ask what made you say that. Some comments feel sharp, but it's not always clear where they're coming from until you ask. Inside a small office, late in the day, two co-workers are finishing up a conversation that's taken an odd turn. One of them, out of nowhere, says, "I just think leadership's kind of checked out lately." It lands awkwardly, vague, maybe a little loaded. The other pauses, but instead of pushing back or changing the subject, they ask quietly, "What made you say that?" No judgment, no sarcasm, just curiosity. There's a short silence. Then, slowly, the first person leans in and says, "It's just, I sent that proposal last week and nobody even responded. It felt like it didn't matter." Now the conversation shifts. The tension drops. What sounded like criticism was actually disappointment. And now there's space to talk about it without defense. Asking, "What made you say that?" works because it gently redirects the energy. Instead of reacting to the comment, you lean into its source. It invites explanation without confrontation. In therapy, it's a way to open up deeper feelings. In parenting, it helps decode what a child is really trying to express. In sales or negotiation, it reveals underlying objections without escalating the moment. It doesn't accuse or correct. It listens without retreating. You're not asking them to justify themselves. You're asking where their words came from. And when people feel heard at that level, they often clarify on their own. Some remarks aren't meant to land hard. They just fall out clumsy. And a simple question, asked softly, can catch them before they do real damage. Mirror their energy, then lead it. Pacing a conversation isn't about control, it's about rhythm, yours and theirs. In the back corner of a small bookstore cafe, a manager and a team member sit down after a long shift. The younger employee is visibly frustrated, shoulders tense, tone sharp, words fast. It's just, nobody listens. I talk, and it's like I'm not even there. The manager doesn't interrupt or try to fix it. Instead, he leans in slightly, matches the pace. That sounds exhausting, he says, voice just as low, just as direct. The employee nods, still tight, but softens just a touch. A few more exchanges follow, the energy slowly shifting, until the manager, now a bit calmer, slows his voice and says, "Can we look at one part of that together?" The employee's breathing evens out. They nod again, this time with more ease. Meeting someone in their energy, whether it's anxiety, frustration, or excitement, helps them feel understood. When people are upset, calm advice can feel like distance. But if you reflect their pace and tone, even briefly, it sends a clear signal. I'm with you in this. And once that's felt, you can begin to slow things down together. Therapists rely on this pacing to gain trust before guiding forward. In parenting, it helps soothe kids in meltdown without force. In negotiation, it brings emotional clients into clearer headspace. In leadership, it diffuses stress by first acknowledging it. You don't have to stay in their energy, you just have to visit it long enough to lead them out. Sometimes the fastest way to move a moment forward is to stop pulling and start walking next to it. Then, when the pace is right, you take the lead. Smile with your eyes. Warmth is read faster than words. And sometimes, the whole conversation changes before it even begins. At a pharmacy counter, a young woman walks up to the register, clearly overwhelmed. She's holding a prescription slip and an overstuffed bag, trying to juggle both while speaking into her phone. The employee behind the counter waits without rushing her. And when she finally looks up, flustered and half apologetic, he meets her with a soft, steady smile, not just at his mouth, but through his eyes. His face doesn't push cheer. It simply shows patience, reassurance, that she's not a problem to solve or a delay to manage. Her shoulders drop just slightly. She ends the call, quietly says thank you, and things move forward more gently from there. A smile that only shows in the mouth can feel like performance. One that reaches the eyes feels like presence. People pick up on that difference instantly. It's not about exaggerating joy or forcing friendliness. It's about signaling safety. The eyes, when soft, show that the person behind them is paying attention in a kind, human way. In therapy, this is how trust begins before the first word. In parenting, it reassures without needing to explain. In customer service and sales, it quiets the room. And in everyday moments, when someone's tense, embarrassed, or unsure, it changes the whole tone of the interaction. You don't need a big smile, you just need a real one. And real always shows up in the eyes. Sometimes what calms a person isn't what you say. It's the simple way you show them you're not in a hurry to judge. You're just here. And for a lot of people, that's more than enough. End with a compliment, always. Final moments often carry more weight than we think. What we say last is what tends to linger. In a small office break room, a short conversation between co-workers winds down. One of them had been venting. A project fell apart, a client didn't respond, and nothing felt like it was landing. The other offered a few suggestions, asked some thoughtful questions, and mostly just listened. As the first one gets up to leave, they pause in the doorway. The listener adds gently, "By the way, I meant to say, your last presentation, It's still being talked about. You really set the tone for the quarter. The room softens. The air clears just a little. The rest of the day goes better, even if nothing else changes. Ending with a compliment doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means choosing what gets remembered. In any interaction, especially ones that are hard, awkward, or emotionally loaded, the final note sticks. A single positive remark can act as a buffer. It helps someone leave the moment feeling seen, not just managed. Therapists often close sessions this way, reinforcing something the person did well. In parenting, it encourages resilience after correction. In sales, it closes a pitch with sincerity. In leadership, it leaves the door open for future trust, even after disagreement. You don't have to flatter. You don't have to sugarcoat. Just find one thing real and say it. The last thing you offer someone, even in passing, often becomes the first thing they carry into whatever comes next. And when that thing is something kind and true, it stays longer than you think. Be interested, not interesting. Sometimes the most magnetic person in the room is the one who isn't trying to be. A man and a woman sit at opposite ends of a shared bench outside a small bookstore. It's one of those quiet afternoons where no one's in a rush. The man strikes up a conversation. Nothing flashy, just a comment about the book she's holding. She smiles, says she's rereading it for the third time. Instead of offering his own opinion, he asks what keeps her coming back to it. Her answer leads to something more: family, memory, old routines. She keeps talking, and he keeps listening, not with polite nods, but with real attention. 10 minutes pass before she finally says, "I don't usually talk like this to strangers." But she's not apologizing. She's surprised, grateful even. Being interested in someone, rather than trying to be interesting yourself, shifts the energy. It removes the need to impress. And in that space, people relax. They become more open, more engaged. In sales, this builds trust faster than any clever pitch. In therapy, it draws out depth. In parenting, it tells a child their thoughts matter. In dating, it makes space for something honest. And in everyday life, on benches, in waiting rooms, over shared meals, it's how meaningful connection quietly begins. You don't have to be memorable to make an impact. You just have to make someone feel like they are. In the end, people rarely remember your stories as much as how you made them feel while they told theirs. And the one who asks with curiosity, not ego, often leaves the strongest impression of all. Ask, what are you thinking right now? Some moments go quiet for reasons that aren't obvious, and the only way through them is to gently ask. Two people sit side by side in the corner of a small conference room, papers spread out between them. The conversation had been moving, ideas flowing, until suddenly it wasn't. One of them grows quiet, tapping a pen against the table, gaze somewhere else entirely. The other waits a few seconds, then says softly, "What are you thinking right now?" Not with urgency, not with pressure, just openness. The pause breaks. The quiet one exhales, then says, "Honestly, I don't think this pitch is going to work the way we planned. I just didn't know when to say it." And just like that, the wall lifts. What could have stayed bottled up now has a way out and a way forward. That question, "What are you thinking right now?" works because it doesn't assume. It doesn't direct or guess or try to manage the silence. It simply opens the door. It's useful in therapy when someone shuts down. In parenting, when a child goes quiet but isn't upset. In a relationship, when the energy shifts and no one knows why. In negotiation, when the room stalls and the tension builds. It isn't about solving the moment. It's about reconnecting to it. Asking what someone's thinking lets them steer. It shows you're not here to talk at them, but with them, even if it's uncomfortable. The best conversations aren't always smooth. They're the ones where someone cares enough to notice the silence and is kind enough to step into it without forcing anything at all. When unsure, repeat the last thing they said. It's easy to think you need the perfect reply, but often the best thing you can do is give someone's words back to them. Inside a corner booth of a quiet diner, two friends sit across from each other. One of them is mid-rant. Nothing dramatic, just a slow release of frustration about a strained relationship. It's like no matter what I say, they always hear something else, he mutters, picking at his food. The other friend doesn't jump in with advice. Instead, she repeats gently, "They always hear something else?" He pauses. "Yeah," he says, now more focused. Like I'll ask a question, and they act like I'm accusing them. The conversation deepens, not because she had an answer, but because she gave him room to keep unfolding. When you're unsure how to respond, especially in an emotional or uncertain moment, repeating their last phrase with curiosity keeps the connection alive. It's not robotic. It's not passive. It shows you're engaged, but not rushing. Therapists use this to help clients keep talking without leading them. In parenting, it slows tense moments without invalidating them. In negotiation, it reveals deeper concerns. In relationships, it creates safety without pretending to have solutions. Repeating the last thing someone said gives them permission to stay in the moment, to clarify, reflect, or go deeper on their terms. You don't need to be insightful right away. You just need to show that you're listening well enough to echo something back. Often, that's all it takes for someone to keep going, and eventually to find the clarity they didn't know they were looking for. Say, "That reminds me of a story." Information lands, but stories stay. In a quiet office kitchen, two co-workers sit across from each other during a slow lunch break. One of them is venting, frustrated about how their ideas keep getting overlooked in meetings. There's tension in their voice, but also something quieter underneath. Doubt. The other listens, nods, and says, "That reminds me of a story." They lean back slightly, keeping it casual. "Back at my last job, there was this guy who barely spoke in meetings. But the few times he did, people really listened. Eventually, I asked him how he got people to take him seriously. He said, I stopped trying to sound smart and just waited until I had something I really believed. Took him a while, but eventually everyone started turning to him. The mood shifts, not dramatically, but enough. The first co-worker sits up straighter. The moment feels less like advice, more like recognition. Saying that reminds me of a story is more than a transition. It's an invitation. It softens advice into something shareable. It makes space for emotion without making it feel clinical. In therapy, it builds relatability. In parenting, it teaches without lecturing. In negotiation, it creates common ground. In sales, it makes ideas easier to absorb. And in everyday life, it changes the dynamic from, let me fix this, to, you're not alone in it. People don't always want answers. Often, they just want a thread to hold on to, something familiar, something human. A story does that without pressure. You're not shifting the topic, you're widening the room. And sometimes, that little bit of space is exactly what the moment needs. Speak in stories, not points. Some things are easier to understand when you stop explaining and start remembering. Inside a shared office space, two people sit across from each other, one newer to the team, the other more seasoned. The newer one looks frustrated, overwhelmed. I'm doing everything right, she says, but none of it seems to land. The more experienced colleague nods, pauses, then says, "I had a boss once who never gave feedback. For months, I thought I was failing. Then one day, I made a small change to a report, and he forwarded it to the whole department. No comment, no notes, just sent it out like it was his own." The newer employee raises an eyebrow. The older one shrugs. "That's how I learned his version of approval was silence." She smiles, not because the situation is solved, but because she now sees it from a different angle. The tension eases. The conversation softens. The message didn't come in bullet points. It came in a story. Stories bypass resistance. They're how we actually make sense of things. When you list facts, people evaluate. But when you tell a story, they absorb. In therapy, a short story can replace a long explanation. In parenting, it keeps kids engaged without telling them what to do. In negotiation, stories allow points to land without pushing. In teaching, they turn data into something real. A story gives structure without demanding agreement. It invites people in instead of talking over them. And when you speak in stories, small, human, unpolished ones, you don't just share what you know. You offer a way to feel it. And that's usually what makes it stick. Use humor first, logic later. Tension doesn't always need to be solved. It often just needs to be softened. A man and his teenage daughter sit in the car outside the grocery store. The engine is off. The bags are packed, but neither of them is moving. The mood is heavy. They've been arguing all day. Grades, curfews, tone of voice. It's quiet now, but not peaceful. The father looks ahead, then says, "You know, when I was your age, I was grounded so often, my parents gave me my own punishment calendar. Color-coded." She cracks a smile, tries to hide it. He leans in. "Seriously, I had weekends booked for bad attitude through mid-April." She laughs, just a little. "That's enough." He waits, then adds calmly, "I get that it feels like I'm always on your case, but I need you to hear me when I say I care too much to stay quiet." Humor lowers defenses. It breaks through walls faster than facts ever will. When someone's upset, stressed, guarded, logic can feel like pressure. But a well-placed joke, a little self-deprecation, a surprising line, it creates space. Space for the real conversation to land. In therapy, humor disarms shame. In sales, it turns tension into trust. In parenting, it pulls kids out of their shell. In conflict, it resets the rhythm before a real point is made. You're not using humor to avoid the serious part. You're using it to earn the right to speak it. Sometimes, the best way to be heard isn't to push harder. It's to make someone laugh just enough that they stop bracing. And then, when they're ready, you lead them to the heart of what matters, gently and fully awake. Ask, how did that make you feel? Understanding isn't always about what happened. It's about what it did to someone inside. In a quiet booth of a corner cafe, two friends sit across from each other. One's telling a story, something about a job interview gone sideways. They're speaking quickly, trying to laugh it off. So, I finish answering this question, and the guy just stares at me like I'd spoken another language. The other friend nods, lets a second pass, then asks gently, "How did that make you feel?" There's a pause. The person blinks, exhales. "Embarrassed, I guess. I thought I had it. But in that moment, I felt completely out of place." The tone changes. The pace slows. Now they're not just recounting. They're reflecting. The conversation moves from surface to something steadier. "How did that make you feel?" is one of the simplest questions you can ask, but also one of the most disarming. It shifts the focus from events to emotion, from outside to in. Therapists ask it not to dig, but to let someone slow down enough to meet their own experience. In parenting, it opens space for a child's emotional vocabulary to grow. In conflict, it de-escalates by showing care instead of correction. In leadership or sales, it tells the other person they're being treated like a human being, not a problem to solve. You're not pushing for depth. You're inviting it. You're letting the other person step forward, if they choose to. And when you ask with real interest, not obligation, the answer that follows often becomes the part of the conversation they actually needed most. Break tension with a whisper. Tension doesn't always need to be matched. Sometimes it just needs to be lowered, quietly. Two co-workers sit in a small meeting room, the air stiff after a disagreement. One of them leans forward, voice sharp, outlining a series of missed deadlines. The other stays still, listening, face calm, but unreadable. The frustration builds until it starts spilling into the silence. Then, the listener leans slightly closer and says, barely above a whisper, "I think we're both too tired to win this fight right now." The shift is immediate. The volume in the room doesn't just drop, it disappears. The heat cools. The person across the table exhales, rubs their eyes. "Yeah," they mutter, softer now. "You're probably right." A whisper in a tense moment resets the room. When someone expects resistance and hears gentleness, it disorients the pattern. It tells the nervous system that nothing here is dangerous, that it's okay to let the shoulders fall and the breath slow. In therapy, whispers are used to bring people back from overload. In parenting, they help soothe instead of escalate. In leadership, they shift team dynamics without needing authority. In close relationships, they say, "I'm still with you," without needing to explain. You're not giving up power. You're choosing a different kind of influence. Raising your voice often raises the walls. Lowering it invites the other person to meet you somewhere safer. And in moments that feel charged, the quietest voice often carries the clearest message. We don't need to keep pushing. We can pause even here. Ask to borrow a pen. Small openings often matter more than perfect introductions. In a waiting room just before a training session, two strangers sit a chair apart. One is scanning their phone. The other rifles through their bag, then quietly leans over. "Do you happen to have a pen I could borrow?" No pressure, just a simple ask. The first person glances up, surprised, but not annoyed. "Yeah, hang on." They hand it over, their expression softening. A moment later, the conversation begins. Not forced, just natural. Where they're from, what the session's about, a few shared jokes before the trainer arrives. It's small, but the tension in the room, gone. Asking to borrow something, especially something small like a pen, isn't about need. It's about vulnerability. It gives the other person a role, helper. And without saying it, you've told them you trust them enough to ask. That subtle dynamic creates a kind of warmth. Therapists sometimes use small requests to invite openness. In sales, it builds rapport before the pitch. In classrooms, it levels power. In social settings, it's often the fastest way to shift from strangers to participants. You're not trying to impress. You're asking for something simple, human, and easy to say yes to. And that tiny yes, the moment someone helps you, is often all it takes to break the ice. You've built a bond, not through charm, but through interaction. The right kind. The kind that doesn't ask someone to like you, just to meet you, briefly, naturally, where they are. Thank them for the thought, not the action. Appreciation goes deeper when it's aimed at intention, not just outcome. A man and his colleague sit across from each other in a quiet office lounge. He's just wrapped up a presentation that didn't land quite right. The room was polite, but flat. As he folds his laptop shut, she says, "I know it didn't go how you hoped, but I saw how much you worked on it. Especially that opening. You really tried to make it connect." He looks at her, then nods, slower this time. "Thanks," he says. Not because it solved anything, but because she saw something that mattered, the effort. Most people are used to being thanked for what they did, for staying late, for bringing something, for following through. But being thanked for what they meant, the consideration, the care, the attempt, that lands differently. It feels more real. In parenting, this kind of thank you builds confidence in kids who try, even when they fail. In therapy, it softens shame around unfinished progress. In leadership, it builds loyalty by showing attention to what's often invisible. In sales or service, it transforms a transaction into a relationship. You're not rewarding results, you're honoring where the action came from. Because the truth is, actions don't always go well. The meal gets burned, the plan falls apart, the timing's off. But when someone says, "I appreciate you even thinking to do that," it validates something quieter and more lasting, intention. And in the end, it's not just what people do for us that matters most, it's what they meant to do. That's the part we remember. That's the part that stays. Ask, "Can you help me understand?" In a small office just past closing hours, a manager and an employee sit across from each other. The employee is frustrated, talking quickly, hands moving, listing out why a new policy isn't going to work. The manager listens, but doesn't interrupt. Then, instead of arguing, she leans forward slightly and says, "Can you help me understand what part felt off to you?" The tone shifts immediately. The employee slows down. "It's the rollout," he says. "It felt like it came out of nowhere. No context. It just hit the team mid-week." The manager nods, not because she agrees with everything, but because she finally sees where it's coming from. From there, the conversation becomes a collaboration instead of a pushback. Asking, "Can you help me understand?" isn't about surrendering your view. It's about shifting the ground beneath the tension. It invites the other person to explain without defending. It puts you on the same side of the table, even if your opinions are different. In therapy, this is how breakthrough moments begin. In parenting, it helps kids feel respected. In sales or negotiation, it keeps the conversation open without losing direction. In relationships, it turns conflict into conversation. You're not giving up control, you're creating connection. You're saying, "I care more about understanding you than proving my point." When people feel misunderstood, they dig in. But when they're invited to explain, they often soften. That one question, when asked with real intention, can turn resistance into clarity. And clarity makes everything easier to work with. Say, "Tell me more," instead of arguing. Pushback often makes people louder. Curiosity makes them clearer. At a quiet dinner table after a long day, a couple sits across from each other. The conversation has turned tense. Small things have been piling up. One says, "I just don't feel like you've been present lately." The other starts to speak, ready to defend, ready to explain how that's not true. But they stop, exhale, and instead ask, "Can you tell me more about what that's felt like?" The shift is immediate. The first person leans in, not out of anger, but relief. It's like I'm talking and you're somewhere else. Even when you're home, your mind's still at work. Now it's not a fight. It's something softer. something fixable. Tell me more is an invitation, not a concession. It signals that you're listening for understanding, not just waiting for your turn to speak. It slows the heat and moves the moment toward meaning. In therapy, it's how layers unfold. In parenting, it helps kids process frustration without shutting down. In sales, it uncovers what really matters to the client. In conflict, it lowers walls without needing to prove anything. You're not agreeing. You're asking. You're showing that the person across from you matters more than your need to be right in that second. Arguments often grow from a sense of not being heard, but when you stop trying to win and simply ask for more, you often get the part they didn't say the first time. And that's where resolution usually starts. Quietly, with 3 words that let the other person keep talking until there's nothing left to fight about. Share a secret first. Trust doesn't begin with a question. It begins with what you're willing to reveal. In the back corner of a quiet train car, 2 co-workers sit across from each other, laptops half open but untouched. One of them glances up and says, "I almost didn't take this job. I was convinced I'd be the least qualified person in the room." There's no punchline, no performance, just a calm confession. The other looks surprised, then curious. "Seriously?" The first one nods. "Yeah, imposter syndrome hit hard. I didn't even tell anyone I applied. Felt safer that way." Something shifts. The other person closes their laptop. "Okay. In that case, I guess I can admit I'm terrified of presenting next week. Like, already sweating just thinking about it." The train keeps moving. But now, so does the conversation. When you're the first to open up, even in a small, controlled way, it signals safety. You're not fishing for gossip. You're lowering your guard so they don't have to keep theirs so high. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Just something real, something you wouldn't say to just anyone. In parenting, it helps kids stop performing and start connecting. In therapy, it softens the silence. In leadership, it earns loyalty without demanding it. In conflict, it replaces defense with mutual ground. You're not exposing weakness. You're offering trust. And most people will meet you there if you let them. The real power of sharing a secret first isn't in what you say. It's in what it makes possible for the person across from you. And often, that's the moment everything else starts to feel just a little more honest. Describe their expression, not their mood. Understanding someone doesn't always mean naming what they feel. Sometimes it means noticing what you see, gently and without guessing. In a quiet cafe, late in the afternoon, 2 co-workers sit near the window. One of them is unusually quiet, stirring their drink more than sipping it. The other watches for a moment, then says, "You're staring at the same spot in your cup, and your jaw's been set since we sat down." The first one blinks, surprised, then sighs. "Yeah, sorry. It's been a long morning." The mood opens, not because the emotion was named, but because the tension was seen. When you describe someone's expression, their posture, their gestures, their silence, it's an invitation, a mirror, not a label. Saying, "You look upset," can feel intrusive or presumptive, but saying, "You've been really quiet since that call," leaves room. It lets them decide what it means. In therapy, this creates space without pressure. In parenting, it helps children articulate feelings without making them feel observed or managed. In sales or negotiation, it keeps emotional awareness present without making things personal. In close relationships, it shows attentiveness without control. You're not diagnosing, you're observing, with care, not commentary. People don't always want you to read their mind. but they often want to know you noticed something changed. And the safest way to show that? Reflect the surface. Let them fill in the rest. It's a small shift from saying what you think they feel to what you see happening. But that space is often all someone needs to start opening up on their own terms, calmly and willingly. Comment on the atmosphere, not them. Tension doesn't always need to be named directly. Sometimes it just needs a softer reflection. In a small grocery store checkout line, a woman stands rigidly, arms crossed, eyes forward. The cashier greets her, but she barely responds. Behind her, a man with just a few items waits patiently. He notices the mood, but instead of commenting on her, he glances around and says, lightly, "Feels like the kind of day where everyone's shoulders are up by their ears." The line moves. Her posture softens. She doesn't say much, but the air around her changes. Something small, something tight, lets go. When emotions are high, calling them out directly can backfire. People don't always want to hear, "You seem upset," or "You look stressed." It can feel intrusive. But if you comment on the space, the energy, the tone of the room, it gives them room to breathe without putting them on the spot. In therapy, this gently opens difficult sessions. In parenting, it helps kids feel seen without feeling exposed. In negotiation or sales, it resets the mood without escalating it. Even in friendships, it offers support without pressure. You're not diagnosing the person. You're noticing the room you're both in. That small shift from "you are" to "this feels" makes connection easier. It shows awareness without judgment. And most of the time, that's enough to help someone drop their guard, just a little, without needing to explain themselves. Not every bridge is built by naming what's wrong. Sometimes it starts by noticing what you're both standing in, quietly, together. Say, "That's exactly what I would have said." Reassurance often lands best when it sounds like agreement, not correction. At a small round table in a shared break room, a junior colleague shares an idea during lunch, something about changing the team's workflow to cut down on redundant updates. They speak quickly, slightly unsure, eyes darting to check for signs of approval. The older co-worker across from them listens, then says with a small nod, "That's exactly what I would have said." There's a pause. The younger one blinks, then lets out a quiet laugh. "Really?" The energy shifts. They sit up straighter. The conversation opens. They go on to explain more, with more confidence now. Not because the plan was perfect, but because they no longer feel like they're guessing alone. Saying, "That's exactly what I would have said," is a simple way to affirm someone without overplaying it. It's not exaggerated praise. It doesn't sound performative. It just says, "You're on the right track. And if I were in your shoes, I'd be doing the same thing." That kind of validation is disarming. In parenting, it gives kids a moment of shared thinking. In leadership, it builds confidence in those still learning. In therapy or coaching, it helps someone trust their instincts. In sales, it lets the other person feel like they're already aligned with you. You're not putting yourself above them. You're standing beside them. And when someone hears that their thought already mirrors yours, they don't just feel supported. They feel smart, capable, on the same level. And sometimes, that small bit of shared ground is all it takes to turn hesitation into real momentum. Let them choose the timing. Pressure doesn't always come from the ask. Sometimes it comes from the clock. Late evening in a quiet office hallway, a manager catches their team member just as they're packing up. "Got a quick minute to talk?" The employee hesitates, bag already on their shoulder, face clearly tired. The manager sees it, steps back slightly. Actually, would you rather chat tomorrow morning? The employee nods almost instantly. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. And when they do talk the next day, it's better, less guarded, more focused. Same topic, better timing. Letting someone choose when they engage gives them a small but powerful sense of control. It says, you matter, not just what you can do for me. Whether it's a feedback conversation, a request for help, or an emotional check-in, timing changes how it lands. In therapy, clients open up more when they aren't cornered. In parenting, asking, do you want to talk now or after dinner, creates safety. In negotiation, offering a pause often builds more trust than pushing forward. Even in close friendships, checking when someone wants to talk about something hard shows care that words alone can't. You're not giving up the moment. You're choosing to let it unfold at their pace, not yours. People think better when they feel like they're not being rushed into it. And often, the most meaningful conversations don't happen when you're ready. They happen when they are. Giving them the chance to decide that doesn't slow you down. It makes everything else go more smoothly when the moment finally arrives. Say nothing, just nod. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can say is nothing at all. In a dim corner of a grocery store cafe, two friends sit with half-drunk coffee cups between them. One is speaking slowly, halting, uncertain, about something that happened with their family. It's not dramatic, but it's heavy. The other just listens. No advice, no reactions, just steady eye contact and a single, quiet nod. The speaker exhales, then keeps going. A little faster, a little more freely. Not because they're being guided, but because they feel safe continuing. Saying nothing and simply nodding is one of the most underused but powerful social tools. It tells the other person, I'm still here. Keep going. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shift the spotlight. It just stays with them. In therapy, this is often how the deeper parts of a story emerge. In parenting, it helps kids talk without fear of being corrected mid-sentence. In negotiation, it shows that you're listening without trying to dominate the conversation. In conflict, it prevents escalation by giving someone space to get it all out first. You're not guiding, you're holding the line steady. When people speak, especially about something vulnerable, they're constantly scanning for signals. Is it safe to keep going? Am I being judged? Is this too much? A simple nod at the right moment quiets all of that. Because sometimes the best support isn't saying the right thing. It's saying nothing and proving you're still with them. Every second of the way.